The Secretary General has made it crystal clear. We cannot go on like this. We need to become more nimble, more targeted, and strategic in our use of digital media and in our information literacy tactics, such as pre-bunking.
The what now?
At the Department of Global Communications, this will be a key preoccupation as we adapt the United Nations Verified Initiative to address climate disinformation. Moreover, as the UN system, we need to continue advocating to all other stakeholders to invest in robust digital literacy drives. Our aim should be to empower users of all ages to better understand how digital platforms work, how their personal data might be used, and to identify and respond to mis- and disinformation and hate speech.
Well, let's take a quick look at Stephen Hawking. I've talked a lot about how Stephen Hawking was not a real person. He was a character. And people say, how dare you, Big Bear? How dare you? When Dave Chappelle makes fun of it in 5 years, we'll discuss it. But this is an actual translation. Before his robot voice, he had a translator who looks exactly like Larry Bird. Tell me if you think that anything about this is real.
I think, in a way, physics has been a progress away from mysticism towards a rational understanding of the universe.
Stephen, when did you first realize you wanted to be a physicist?
I think I knew from about the age of 9 or 10 that I wanted to be a scientist. Most of my activities, like playing with model fireworks, or model railways, or playing complicated games, was aimed in some way at finding out how the world worked around me. I was never very good with my hands, when my models did not work very well.
Okay, guys, we can all see that this is not real at all. It was normalized by Han Solo and Chewbacca. As you can see there, on the left is Han Solo, and on the right is Chewbacca. No one understands the grunting and gurgling, but somehow Han Solo, with his he has the same haircut as Han Solo, and he's alleged to be a very handsome Larry Bird guy. There is no way that the gurgling, and this is why the internet changed the entire game with scams, is back in the day, a lot of people were not exposed to people that treat people with ALS or a lot of these ailments. Ukrainian Bear is currently taking care of someone with ALS. We can talk to him right now. Is that possible? Is that actual speech? Of course not. That's legitimately insane. And this guy cheated on his wife. He didn't exist, Matt. That's my point. He was Helen Keller 2.0. It's no extremities. Helen Keller had a British accent, even though she couldn't hear. How is that possible, you ask yourself? Well, it isn't possible. Let's just take another look at this, and then we'll discuss something called empathy vampires. I believe Keanu Reeves is 100% an empathy vampire based on his life story, how he lives, who he's currently with, romantically. I can prove it. I can prove that. I can't prove that there was any kind of satanic sacrifice or anything like that. I think he might actually not even be a super bad guy. He might be completely, I'll have conclusions at the end. But anyway, let's just have another big laugh. And again, there's going to be people that say, how dare you laugh at a cripple? Guys, what you're watching is a scam. That's not an authentically diseased person. And if it is, they're using him. It's kind of like what they did with Greta Thunberg and David Hogg. They'll use children as human shields to front their agendas, and then when you attack them, they go, how dare you attack a child? Well, why did you put a child on CNN? So I believe that Stephen Hawking was alive with ALS for about 5 years. That's typically how long. I think he was a real person. I think he had it, and I think that people saw that for some reason, more of the masses were listening to a guy because of his disease than if he had a faster mind because it degenerates the mind and the ability to communicate. So then they used his brand, probably a puppet, guys. I don't know, someone playing the role. I don't know, but guys, this isn't actual translation.
I think in a way physics has been a progress away from mysticism towards a rational understanding of the universe.
Stephen, when did you first realize you wanted to be a physicist?
I think I knew from about the age of 9 or 10 that I wanted to be a scientist. Most of my activities, like playing with model fireworks, or model railways, or playing complicated games, was aimed in some way at finding out how the world worked around me. I was never very good with my hands, so my models did not work very well. But I was always interested in models that I could control. And I think that nowadays I have translated that into studying physics. Because in a way,
The funniest guy by far is this guy, because I think he's watching this whole thing like, just don't point out that this isn't real.
Welcome to The Independent Review, a weekly podcast where we bring you the latest from the world of independent journalism. Whether you're a news junkie, a curious learner, or just looking for a fresh perspective away from the corporate media, this is the show for you. So join us now as we dive into the world of independent journalism on The Independent Review.
Welcome to the Independent Review. First, a quick shout out to Chris from Rantcast for sharing that clip from Owen Benjamin in the opener. Today's show has clips from James Corbett, Jimmy Dore, the Indie News Network, and much more. Let's go to our first clip with Hrvoje Moric.
This is the Hrvoje Moric Show on today's News Talk, TNT Radio.
It's our final segment with James from manufacturingreality.org. Bookmark the website, subscribe to his stuff. He's got a great program he does every week, and you can even call into his show and join him. And I did want to ask you, this just came to my mind, James. We on the telegrams, we kind of bring this up, get your thoughts on alternative media. And how alternative media is kind of becoming almost mainstream. David Icke calling it mammies, the mainstream alternative media. You often mention controlled opposition, and I definitely do think among us there are a host of people. There are people doing good work. There are grifters who are a bit narcissistic. There are controlled ops. I some of these people pushing multipolarity. 1,000%, I think, some of them are being paid by the Kremlin or Beijing. I don't doubt. And so, your thoughts just on the state of alternative media? I don't think you or I are fans of Elon Musk. We see right through him. But your sort of thoughts on alt media today, and then where it might be headed this year.
Well, last year at the end of the year, which I guess, of course, would have been 2022, I predicted that 2023 was going to be the year that the independent media rises and supplants the mainstream media. And I don't think I was far off in that prediction. However, you are correct in identifying the fact that there are players in the alternative media space, or what I call the independent media space, that would appear to be less than legitimate and basically just, new versions of the same old thing that we've had from the networks, from the cable stations, radio, newspaper, whatever. They're just new versions of the same old thing. And they're playing the same game, which is kind of what makes them easy to identify without having to, actually name any names. I think as we get further away from the traditional media production sources, the television networks, Hollywood, the various large production companies, I think what we're going to start to see is even more separation between the people who are promoting whatever the official narrative is at the time and the people who are just covering whatever they want to cover. I think that split is going to widen as more time goes by. And I think it's going to make it even easier to tell, who is being authentic with their media and who isn't. How that's going to take place, I don't really know. This is just the trend that I see. And it wasn't COVID that brought this to my attention. This was something that I started to notice 10 years ago when I was working for Verizon. And I remember going into work one day and I was told, oh, well, Verizon's going to buy Yahoo, and they're going to buy all these other little companies, and some of them were literally just media production companies. That's all they did. They didn't have really any sort of communications infrastructure or anything like that you would think would be attractive to a telecom, right? And I was like, well, this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Why are they buying media production companies? And what I was told by my supervisor was Verizon's getting into the TV business. I mean, that wasn't the exact words that they used, but basically they were like, they're going to start producing and broadcasting their own media. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. I don't see how it's going to work yet, but that's interesting. And as more time has gone by, it's become very, very clear exactly how that's going to work, because you have all of these new production companies again that have sprung up since the COVID regime started 4 years ago, and they are now becoming major players in the media space, supplanting a lot of the old, what we call legacy or dinosaur media production companies. So even though the landscape is shifting and technology has enabled individuals to be able to produce higher quality content and offer it to an ever increasing audience, you still have the curation that is going on in the space through the funding of these independent production companies. It makes the landscape a lot murkier than what it used to be, in my opinion. It makes authenticity, as I mentioned previously, a lot more difficult to verify. But again, to me, that just puts the onus back onto the individual that's consuming the media. Because again, as a consumer, whether we're talking about a video that you're about to watch, whether we're talking about a car that you're going to buy or whatever, if you are paying your attention to something, you better be a conscientious consumer of it and understand not only what is explicit, that also illicit, that they're not exactly telling you about up front and just trying to sneak it into your subconscious on the sly. It's the world that we exist in today, media-wise, is nothing like most of us would have been able to imagine even 30 years ago, I don't think. But there are people who imagined it, and they imagined it much, much longer than 30 years ago. And we're seeing it come to form and come alive and take shape in the 21st century. Where you can literally now, you can have a relationship with your favorite star, right? Whoever that is. Now, maybe not necessarily Brad Pitt or Charlize Theron or someone like that, but like if you're a huge fan of Steven Crowder, there's a chance that you could catch his attention on Twitter, and you two could spend the rest of your lives as friends. I don't know that that's anything that people have really had the chance to wrap their heads around yet. These figures that they used to put up on pedestals, or sometimes still do, are now accessible to them in a way that they never had been before. And unfortunately, I think that's part of what is driving a lot of the, I guess you could call it idolatry in the media realm today. I'm not sure exactly what other word to put to it at this point. Because I always talk about it as the golden calves, right? Everybody's got their golden calf that you're not allowed to criticize for any reason whatsoever. They get triggered. They get really, really upset. People have got to wake up to the fact that they have to be conscientious consumers of everything that they choose to put in front of them, not just their food and their material goods. It's also what you put into your eyes and ears.
Yeah, and I tend to trust a bit more, just in general, some of the more skeleton crew productions. I generally don't like anything that's too slick. So, I like, like the Ryan Christian's Last American Vagabonds, Richard Groves, James Corbetts, where they're a certain size, but then stuff that's really like big and slick in alt media, I really start to get suspicious, because then there's a lot of money behind it that's come too quickly, that kind of makes you think, what? And then as you say, some of the things that they start to talk about, and predictions that they make that don't come true, a lot of clickbaiting, a lot of fear. Even now, alt media doing the whole fear porn thing just to sell survival gear, and I'm like, whoa, guys, come on. And I think that's disingenuous. And some people that for a long time I thought were authentic, and just like, stop trying to sell me the latest, whatever. And so we're 2.5 minutes to midnight. Any other thoughts? We got the wars popping off. Any other things going forward?
Well, I mean, I expect a lot of things going forward in 2024. Like I said, I expect it to be like nothing we have ever seen before, and probably at least a pinch and a dash more of nothing like you can imagine. My hope is for folks to finally come to the realization that the way that this entire control structure that we live under, the way it finally ends, is when they remove their agency and their power from it and take it back into their own lives and use it to build the life that they want to live. Because that's really what it is all about, folks. It's about not waiting for somebody else to do the thing that you want in your life, and actually just doing it yourself, regardless of who tells you it's a bad idea, or you shouldn't do it, or you're going to get hurt, or whatever. All of those pieces of advice are fine. But if they're preventing you from doing something that you think is in your best interest, then it's up to you to decide whether or not to follow that advice. Because at the end of the day, it's your life. You should live it the way that you want to, and hopefully without hurting anybody else. That's the way I try to do it.
Yeah, one of the reasons I started my podcast was I couldn't find anyone around me smart to talk to, so I found a way to connect to people around the world like yourself. We're about out of time. Hopefully we talk again in 2024. James, I'm going to be jumping on some of your calls, your programs as well. Again, 30 seconds left. Tell us the best places to find you.
Best place to find us is manufacturingreality.org. We have a nice widget on the website that lights up when we are live on the air.
All right, very cool. Have a rocking and rolling 2024, James.
Here's what happens, okay? When the United States comes to you and says, hey, we've got a really bright idea, let's go fight somebody. They went to Zelensky, and Zelensky said, hey, the most powerful country in the world is going to finance my corrupt government and give us all its money and all these weapons. What a wonderful idea. When I was 10 years old or 12 years old, I was a skinny little thing. And whether it was picking a team for basketball or picking a team for football or picking up a team for baseball, I was always the last one picked because I was a skinny little thing. Okay. When you're going to go to war, don't go to war with an empire in collapse that's lost every war it's fought since World War II, and the United States didn't win World War II. The Russians did. They killed 80% of the Germans who died. The United States has been in a vacuum. Those idiots in Washington, and Lindsey Graham is the leader of the fools, talk to each other, and what's even more dangerous is they listen to each other. The United States has got all these weapons and these aircraft carriers and these submarines and all this magnificent stuff that we paid trillions of dollars for. They go to Netanyahu, says, hey, if you go attack Gaza, we'll supply you with 2,000-pound bombs until you run out of jet fuel. And Netanyahu said, hey, I could stay out of jail. But what he didn't understand, and it's so simple, when you go to war, you don't want the smallest, skinniest kid. You want the biggest, meanest dragon that you can hire. Israel made a fatal mistake. The former head of the IDF Air Force came out on the 8th or 9th of October, and he said Israel has fallen into a trap. Now, I'm going to tell you something, and it's going to sound a little egotistical, but damn, I spent 20 months in war. I got some idea of what war is all about. The Russians and the Chinese and the North Koreans and the Iranians and the Hutus are winning this battle 99% to 1. Okay? If you look at what those idiots have done in Ukraine, they have destroyed that country. And the CIA goes to Zelensky and says, hey, we'll give you these Sea Shadow missiles. Why don't you go attack a bunch of civilians? And that'll piss Russia off, and they'll do something, and then we can attack them. The CIA always thinks tactically. But if you're going to fight a war, you have to think strategically. And the CIA and the American military does not have a strategy. They didn't have a strategy in Vietnam. I used to ask people, okay, tell me, this is such a great war. How are we going to win? What are we going to do that's convinced the NBA and the Viet Cong to stop fighting? Nobody could ever come up with an answer. What is the strategy in Ukraine? Well, the strategy in Ukraine is keep throwing soldiers in until you run out of Ukrainian blood. Israel bet on the wrong horse, and they're going to pay a real price. And if they think Hamas was a bunch of nasty motherfuckers, they haven't seen anything until they've seen Hezbollah again. And Hezbollah is going to flatten Israel, and that's going to change the name of the game. And Israel thinks, well, we use nukes. But Erdogan has just told Netanyahu, hey, if you use nukes, we'll go to Pakistan, we'll get some nukes too. Russia has started feeding anti-aircraft missiles to Syria and to Lebanon. And one of these days, very soon, they're going to shoot down 10 or 15 Israeli jets. Israel and the United States and the EU and NATO are betting on the wrong horse. And they keep trying to expand the war, and they keep losing, and they're not learning.
Now, let's take a look at this clip from Jimmy Dore.
Hey, big story involving Jimmy Kimmel and the Epstein list. Jimmy Kimmel strikes back at Aaron Rodgers after he speculates comedian is on Epstein's list. You want to hear him? Here it is.
Mm-hmm. Bring it up, Foxy or somebody back there.
Seats on it.
We have Super Bowl 58.
You'll see it.
The emblem, put it on the screen. And then bring up 57 and 56.
Does that have something to do with the Epstein list that came out? Feels like
That's supposed to be coming out soon. Look,
this guy's been waiting in his wine cellar.
Yeah.
I've been waiting in my wine cellar for this thing.
A lot of people, including Jimmy Kimmel, are really hoping that doesn't.
All right. Obviously, a clip from this particular program was run on Jimmy Kimmel's show whenever Aaron brought up the list, and then Jimmy mocked him for it. Mm-hmm. Aaron has not forgotten about that, but here we are sitting right in front of that nice bottle of scotch. Mm-hmm. What do you say? I'm waiting to celebrate something.
Oh, yeah.
He's been waiting for that. One.
So there you go. That's what he said.
Why did Jimmy mock him for bringing up the Epstein list?
I don't know, but according to USA Today, Jimmy Kimmel is slamming Aaron Rodgers after the football player accused the Jimmy Kimmel Live host of being one of more than 150 names on Jeffrey Epstein's list of associates. Rodgers, who's 40, in a discussion of the list during a Tuesday appearance on the Pat McAfee show, accused the comedian by name of being one of the people noted on the soon-to-be-released document. So Jimmy Kimmel tweeted this out. "Dear asshole, for the record," first of all, he misspells it. There's not two A's in asshole. "Dear asshole, for the record, I've not met, flown with, visited, or had any contact whatsoever with Epstein, nor will you find my name on any list other than the clearly phony nonsense that soft-brained wackos like yourself can't seem to distinguish from reality. Your reckless words put my family in danger."
Really? They're going after his family for this?
Come on.
Yeah, they always go
Keep it up and we will debate the facts further in court. Okay, so
and
here
I will show up in full blackface, pal.
So here is something that is true. So this is from Newsweek. Video of Jimmy Kimmel with Jeffrey Epstein's personal chef goes viral. So that's Jeffrey Epstein's personal chef, and Jimmy Kimmel. I've heard reports that they do Thanksgiving together. Well, here's what the Daily Beast says.
He's an investor in his restaurant.
Jimmy Kimmel is an investor in Jeffrey Epstein's restaurant. Jeffrey Epstein's personal chef's restaurant.
You know he's a good chef if he worked for Epstein. Come on.
Yeah. Lang's Hotspot, called ADL, is backed by one of his besties.
The Anti-Defamation League?
Late night host Jimmy Kimmel and community actor Joel McKay. His resume includes appearances on Kimmel's show, nods from Oprah Winfrey, and a spot on the New York Times bestseller list for his book, Serious Barbecue. But to Virginia Gouffre, Lang was Epstein's personal chef and someone she considered a friend. Lang sneaked pizza to her after Epstein, who controlled the diets of women he abused to keep them prepubescent and thin, fell asleep upstairs.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Lang was someone Gouffre wouldn't forget. He used to talk to me like I was a person, Gouffre told Palmieri. Even if I was standing naked in front of him, he wouldn't be there ogling me. He would be looking directly at my face, and we had wonderful moments together. So
it sounds like a strange moment to deal with, actually.
So that's not nothing.
No, not at all.
That's not nothing at all.
So he must know a lot of stuff.
So this is really the question. Okay, so let's assume you weren't on the island, you didn't take the plane. Why would you be friends with this scumbag?
But why would you be friends with this guy? To her, wasn't he?
Gouffre, look, I mean, she was in this horrific abusive situation, right, and her memory is like the person who slips food to the slaves, right? So she remembers him fondly, but we, not having been abused, can look at this from the outside and say, well, what the hell was he doing in that situation?
Right.
Why wasn't he calling the police?
Exactly.
Oh, so he was nice to the women who were abused? That's really not good enough. I'm sorry. You don't get vindicated for working for a monster because you slipped pizza to the girls being abused.
That's like being the nice guard at the concentration camp.
That's
Why
it.
don't we just
That's
end
it.
the
That's
whole
how she's
government
describing him.
What's that?
Why don't we just end our whole government then, if that's the...
So why are you friends with a guy like this? Why are you friends with him? Let's assume you never met Epstein. You had nothing to do with that. Why would you keep this company? And for that matter, why does Oprah always come up with these sexually abusive
She's a human
people?
trafficker. I know why. Jimmy likes him, because Jimmy's a big pizza guy. So any chef that sneaks you pizza, didn't he have a tattoo that said pizza on it? Like, he'd probably sneaking Jimmy pizza on his.
So it would have made.
diets.
So if I was advising Jimmy Kimmel, which I'm obviously not, I haven't spoken with Jimmy Kimmel since 2004 or 5, something like that. But I would have told him, don't respond to it. Just let it go. If your name's not on the list, then what do you give a shit? When the list comes out, your name won't be on it.
Also, is he really a comedian? I'm really more offended
that they call him a comedian.
He was a game show host on Win Ben Stein's Money.
Yeah, he never went out and did stand-up comedy.
Yeah,
That's what you mean. He never was. Yeah. He never did sketch comedy. Never did comedy. He was.
Your writers aren't great, Jimmy. You're a guy that reads real mediocre to bad material on a shitty ass talk show. A comedian. Shut up.
It is a little offensive that they call him.
Who the hell thinks of Jimmy Kimmel as a comedian that they look up to anyway in all comedy?
The 17 people left.
Not even his writers.
That's like saying Seth Meyers is a comedian.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? Have you ever seen Seth Meyers do comedy?
It's actually less offensive because I know he was at least a comedy writer.
Yeah, he was a comedy writer.
Okay. But he's a charisma suck as well. But Jimmy Kimmel, no, that's just a game show host that people write for. He's a comedian. Yeah, James Corden's a comedian.
Okay, so we covered it. There you go. Good luck. Good luck to Jimmy Kimmel.
I hope his family's not in too much danger.
Come see us do a live stand-up show. We'll be in Venice, California, Palmdale, California, Omaha, Des Moines, Milwaukee, Lansing, Bend, Oregon, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, Boston, Massachusetts, and we're going to Europe. Do you live in Europe? We're going to be there. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets.
Next, we take a look at this clip from Johnny Vedmore and his interview with Courtenay Turner.
But I thought it was so interesting because I had friends. I remember I dated a guy at the time who was like a hardcore Ron Paul fan. And,
had a Ron Paul hat and a few badges around the place. And
my dad was like, "You can't listen to these crazy people. I mean, they're just Looney Tunes." And I'm like, and in hindsight, I'm like, didn't George Washington warn us against the two-party system? And his reason for it was that it was a loophole for foreign entanglements. And where are we today? Yeah, that was his reason for it, because he said that it was.
Yeah, he was a clever one, wasn't he? He was a.
Well, I think. One. I mean, I don't know for sure. I certainly wasn't there, but I think it's because he was a Mason and he watched the French Revolution and he watched the infiltration of the Illuminati and the Masonry, and a lot of how they infiltrated was kind of this Hegelian dialectic, manipulation, and I think he saw that and was like, we can't do that. He was trying to warn of the danger. He actually used the book. It's John Robeson's book, Proof of the Conspiracy, which was published in 1789 or 1798.
Wow.
Look, but it was and it was an admission of like he was an insider, and George Washington used that book as evidence that the Illuminati was trying to infiltrate and to warn the American public of the dangers of the Illuminati infiltration.
And everybody worships George Washington to this day, but no one listens to the words he said.
Say that again?
Everybody worships Washington to this day, but no one listens to the words that he said.
Exactly. It's so true. And Jefferson used the book Proof, the Code of the Illuminati, to warn the public.
Wow.
And that book was published the same year. So yeah,
that's some amazing stuff. When you were speaking then and you were talking about, if people are watching the video version and they're seeing my face get all really excited while you're talking about a certain period of time, those are my excited looks. If you can't tell, they're like, oh, whoa, yeah, she's talking about 1910 and 1911. That's my, I've done a lot of research in all of these different areas, but there's this one area that ties the two up that would I really need to investigate, and I'm touching on it at the moment with an article I'm writing that I'm 150 years ahead of anybody else on writing this article, I reckon.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. It's an amazing story. I think, and I'll say part of it because it'll be almost impossible for people to people could go and watch something about him on. I got a thing called controller virus on which it was my first attempt at making a documentary and saying, okay, see if anybody can help me make a documentary. But people enjoyed it. They just know there was no one there to kind of help me, and I was doing loads of other things at that time, and my life was changing. But really, it looked back at 1910 and 1911 and the people who were involved in the Manchurian outbreak of the plague that killed about 60,000. And it was the first time that China had done an international symposium. The guy who actually ran the symposium was a guy called Dr. Wu. And Dr. Wu was the guy who invented the N95 mask. He was the guy who thought that up. In actual fact, nearly all virus protocols, lockdown protocols that look for the vaccines, all are really here in 1910, 1911, because Dr. Strong got sent by the Rockefeller Institute by America. He was studying in Manila, got sent across to be the American representatives with his assistant.
The Rockefellers tried to set up in I'm not sure what part of China, I'm blanking, but they tried to set up a whole like university system to implement the allopathic method in China. It didn't work because after the first one, it became too expensive. So it didn't take off. But yeah, and I was very curious about that because China uses, Chinese medicine is, very much an ancient practice and very different from allopathic.
Still 1910, 1911 is important for that too within China. As this is happening, there's a whole bundle of things. Just after the symposium happens, the last emperor of China is installed on the throne by the Japanese. So it's the Japanese take control of China, really, political control. And just after, and all of these people are suddenly like working under a different kind of slightly different system, and they start to knock out want to knock out Chinese traditional methods out of society because they're getting orders from the Japanese, and the Japanese are about to start testing on everybody. They're going to use the Chinese as guinea pigs. And so the Russians send a guy called Zabolotny, who's the first guy who found some sort of like a vaccine for TB by giving himself TB, I think, something like that. Or no, it was typhoid, sorry, or something along those lines anyway. But it was something, he gave himself a vaccine and he didn't get ill, and he claimed that he gave himself the disease and he didn't get affected. But he was at the head of the Women's Institute in St. Petersburg, and he was a big player. He wrote loads about what to do in when there's an outbreak and to lock down and do all of those things. Well, at the same time, Reginald Farrar shares a name with Jeremy Farrar, got sent from England, and I think he's the illegitimate great-grandfather of Jeremy Farrar, and that it's kind of hidden from history. And Reginald Farrar, he basically examined what was going on in Manchuria, and Fujian was a place which had a full lockdown where they sectioned it up into areas and people had to have set passes to pass through, and there was loads of like lockdown mechanisms he examined, and he presented his findings to the Board of London when he got back in detail, and they had the questions and answers, which is amazing. And they all went there with a load of people who were making like what was then state-of-the-art potential vaccinations. So they were just testing. Hafkin's prophylactic was tested on people, and only a certain amount of people died, so it's okay. And it's amazing. They were going into prisons and they were saying to condemned men, we'll give you a virus and then you try this out, and then and if you die, it doesn't matter anyway, you're gonna die, aren't you? And so there was just like, they were testing on them. The Japanese sent Kitasato Shibasaburo, who was one of the most evil men in history. He, at one point later, once the Japanese took over, they cordoned off an entire Chinese village, gave them plague, and anybody who tried to leave got shot. So they all just saw, just to watch how without food and with plague, how people were going to just be fighting and ripping each other apart. Kitasato Shibasaburo used to do the most evil tests on people. I mean, really like pre-Nazi, taking skin off people stuff, you know, really horrible human being of the highest order. But in 1911, all these people met together and looked at the whole of what had happened in this Manchurian outbreak, where out of the 60,000 people who died, there was only 3 who got the virus and survived, or got the plague and survived. It was a pneumonic plague. So it was only 3 who survived, and they survived with really bad defects, like they had really bad problems afterwards. And it was described as not proper life. But that period, 1910, 1911, there's so much going on. There's this whole idea of a whole new world that they can create with medicine and science and all of these things that are happening all at once. And I think it partly comes with the creation of that explosive sort of creation, the creation of bigger explosions, and that comes with it. But when you talk about that period, my eyes just like it's like I'm on heroin, because I want to know about that period. And it was a really special period. You're talking about as well, that, you know, the founding fathers basically warning of the infiltration of things like the Illuminati. And is round table groups that got created during this period, are they just the product of that warning not being heeded?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't think that they're a product of the warning not being heeded. I mean, I think that they're a mechanism. You know, I see the roundtable groups as a way of it. To me, it's very much like the mafia. You know, it's a way of diverting the tasks and the attention. You know, the mafia boss is not going to be the hitman, but he's got a bunch of people doing his bidding for him. So, you know, if they're going to come after anyone, they're obviously not going to come after him because they can't pin it on him. So that's kind of how I see the roundtable groups. It's a way of being able to divert and create very intricate webs. And of course, you know, they do this all in secrecy. And so then they're able to, you know, execute their plans with a lot of leverage and power. Part of the secrecy is not just you know, to withhold the information. It's also a lever of power. And actually, Adam Weishaupt talked about that because he was a student of Ingolstadt. He was a Jesuit scholar, and he said that he modeled the Illuminati structure after the Jesuits, because that's why it has the hierarchical structure, because he said that secrecy was one of the ways that he could entice people to feel a sense of clout and importance, and also to buy in. So I think that's part of the reason. It's not, I think a lot of people think it's just to withhold the information so more can get done, but I think it's actually to hold a lever of power over somebody, because people want to feel like they're important and they're part of the in-group. So
you seem to have such a vast array of knowledge. It's just like about history, which is just like fills in lots of the gaps of what I don't know. And is that only over the past few years? Have you been reading about this stuff for a long time, or is this just like, are you because I think I'm a bit of a sponge for certain knowledge because passion. Have you got that? Is that what it is?
Yeah, and it really has been the past 2 years. I mean, as I said, I was pretty normie prior to 2020. You know, I was never on the quote unquote left. You know, I was never like a crazy Marxist, but I was definitely, you know, I bought into all the you know,
I used to watch Stephen Colbert. Oh,
did you? I had a lot of friends who did, and yeah. I actually, when I was in college and right after college, I mean, I was an actress and I was in the film industry. And so I had really tried very hard to become like not even a Democrat, just on the left, because I thought that I would have more friends, I'd be more accepted, life would just be easier. So I really tried. And what I found was the more that I tried, the further away from that line of thought I became, because I kept asking questions, and the more absurd the narratives became to me, the less justification for that line of thought there was. So I actually became more entrenched in my thoughts the harder I tried not to. But yeah, no, I very much towed the what you would call establishment, American Republican narrative. And I started this podcast actually with the whole, if we could just vote harder, get the right people in office, we could fix this whole mess. And I started off, I remember I used to say that I thought that the Republican Party was behaving as controlled opposition for the left. And, it took me not very long before I changed it to no, the Republican Party was created to be controlled opposition for the left. That was by design. And I very much see that now. So I think, no, I just started diving in when I realized how much I was being lied to about everything. And because I am such a curious person, I want to know why, and I want to know what is the truth. And I don't claim to have all the answers, but I'm also really interested in, most of my early academic and just my childhood was really seeped in studying human nature. I was very fascinated I read Freud when I was 9. I did an independent study. Yeah.
I was reading Judge Dredd, man.
I don't know what that is.
2000 AD Judge Dredd. Oh, back in Mega City 1. In the future. Anyway, go on. Sorry. Definitely comic books, not Freud.
Okay, well, it sounds interesting also, but no, I was reading Freud. I read Greek mythology as a very little kid. I was always reading like biographies. And then in high school, I wrote 285-page theses on dream analysis. My mentor was the founder of the Association for the Study of Dreams. I did an independent study in philosophy. I did whenever I had the opportunity to do independent research, I studied the pre-Socratics. I did a study on the trial of Socrates. My school actually published that. They published my dream work as well. So I just had a really strong interest in human nature and why people do what they do. And when 2020 happened, I realized how much I was being lied to about everything. I just wanted to understand, how did we get where we are today? Because it's really people. I mean, people want to pin the tail on the donkey, but the reality is it's not like you can point the finger at one person. I mean, maybe there's a similar line of thought that permeates through, but I don't think you can say, oh, it's all the fault of John D. Rockefeller. It doesn't work that way. He was definitely, I don't think he was a good guy in a lot of respects. I mean, he was definitely responsible for a lot of the, things that we see today that I don't look too favorably upon, but I don't pin everything on him. It's not, and he's just one example, you could say Kissinger, the list goes on and on, but, or the Illuminati or whoever. It doesn't work that way. How it works is you have ideas that get, weaponized and targeted through, mass line actions, literally. And you also have people who are, they're sifting through, everybody's just trying to live their life. And I think that people get wrapped up in belief systems, and that can create polarity, and it advances agendas. But it's the people that have led us to where we are today. And so that's what I wanted to study, and I wanted to understand, how did that happen, and what can we do to preserve the free will of humanity? Because really that's what I see as being at stake.
I have a fear that free will is a difficult one, because we cede our will over, we concede all of the time to the other side. And I was trying to describe it to someone recently, where I was saying, I ended up actually using Jordan Peterson as an example, because they were saying, why do these people join cults, join lodges, join all of these different organizations? Is it just, are they all satanic? Are they all this? Are they all that? And it's there's human dynamics of just wanting to belong and feeling out of place. And when you go into a place where you find like-minded people, my godson come over earlier, and his dad is just like one of my best friends. He loves fishing to a degree that I can't even imagine. I just when I watch him fishing shows, I have no idea what's going on in his brain. It just looks fantastic. He's completely excited by just watching a ship on water and a guy going like this on but he's enthralled, and he's looking at all of the little gadgets. He's just like, oh, it's just what enthralls people, you don't know. But when you get into a group of fishermen, then if you've got like a load of people who are all wanting to be part of this gang, or suddenly find a group of people who are like-minded, akin, have roughly the same background, roughly the same education, they feel more comfortable around. They also, pat each other on the back, give each other good things. Yeah, it's all very nice, but there's always a person that needs to lead, needs to step out in front. And that's what drives the evil in our society to an extent, but it drives everything in our society, is the fact that the one person, usually the greediest, or the deemed the more powerful than most of the group. So the reason why I use Jordan B. Peterson as an example was, you watched all of his Bible lectures, and
I have not watched all, that's the one I didn't finish, but because that was when I started to shift my views on him. So but I've watched some of them. I have.
The crowd, the people he speaks to, are in awe of him. At the end, is they're just in awe of him. So he's like, up there as like this being that scares these people who are down below, who come, and what these people do is they submit to this person. They submit to this this power that this person gives in a public space with a lot of people. And that is how a cult is formed. That's how a cult is driven on, is that it just needs the one, because that person at the top can believe his own rhetoric and believe his own power and believe that it makes him more powerful to know this information. And what he's seeing in return is power, is an increased power, people submitting underneath and bowing their head and saying, oh, you're so knowledgeable, I'm going to listen to you more, I'm going to, we are so used to bending over to someone who's more superior in a way that we don't even notice. And it's our starstruck, especially on the independent media. When RFK Jr. come along, everybody got starstruck for a bit, and now they're all complaining about how he's an he's anti-Gazan. I suppose he's still an anti-Semite, really. Because they're Semites, so it don't matter anyway. I would say anti-Canaanite, because they're all Canaanites around that region. You don't want to trust them. 50 to 60% Canaanites, both Jewish people, and it is genetically. It's amazing. But we're looking for the leader, and when the leader appears, that leader's ideology is what we follow. And so the names you mentioned there, the people who just step out with a good understanding of the ideology of power, I suppose.
I absolutely agree with that assessment. I think that is right on target. I think what happens is that it creates Gnostic cults. So essentially,
this is what this person was speaking about. She was speaking about Gnostic cults.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How interesting. Yeah, that's really how I see it. I think that it's Gnostic cults, and I think this has always been true of humanity. I mean, that this has always existed, but I think that it has become much more codified and much more weaponized since the Frankfurt School. The Frankfurt School, they took the identity politics, and really they carved that that strategy of using identity politics in order to create factions and groups, and to strip people of individual identity in order to have people, they prey on people's desire to belong, the social nature of humanity, in order to be part of something bigger than themselves. And so they create these groups. And, of course, this is, I talk about the Hegelian dialectic a lot, and a lot of people, have heard thesis, antithesis, synthesis, or problem reaction solution. And those can explain it, but really his wording was actually, he said abstract, negative, concrete. And it was really the thesis, antithesis, synthesis came from John Gottlieb Fichte, who he was very much influenced by.
What's the original? Sorry, I tried to remember it.
The
And then
thesis, antithesis, synthesis
is
what John Gottlieb Fichte codified. It was taken after, it was his interpretation of Kant's dialectic, right? Like Plato had the allegory of the cave. He had the intelligible realm, the dividing line, the unintelligible realm, right? The people watching everything on the shadows on the wall in the cave. And then, of course, the unintelligible realm is out there, the world outside. And that really, I would say, was one of the first really strong codifications of this dialectic. And then Kant had his, which was the thesis, antithesis. I don't know if he actually coined it that way, but that was how Fichte interpreted it. And that Hegel felt that was too abstract. And it really, when he says it's too abstract, I think what he meant was it was too intellectual, and he wanted something that could be used as methodology. And he had his science of phenomenology, which is where he talks a lot about this. And he was trying to create a methodology for advancing the historicity of man. And the historicity of man for him would advance towards an omega point where for him, he believed that the state equal God. And so, all the power should be in this all-consuming state, which would, lord over us. And so what he said, abstract, negative, concrete, the reason I bring this up a lot is because the negative is the term in German was Aufheben, which means it's an oxymoronic term that means to lift up and preserve while simultaneously tearing down and canceling. And then, of course, from the Frankfurt School, we get Aufheben to culture, which is cancel culture. I don't think I need to explain that. Most of us are familiar with cancel culture these days. But they really were masters of this stripping people of individual identity and creating this Aufheben to culture that was tied to identity, what we call identity politics now. And I think part of why they did that is because of exactly what you're talking about. I'm sorry, this is so long-winded, but it circles back to exactly what you're describing, because I think as human beings, we do have a sense of wanting to belong. And it's for survival purposes, because we are social creatures. And in, Paleolithic man, if he was isolated and left to fend for himself, the chances of him surviving were very slim. That's why being ostracized feels like a physical threat. Oftentimes, when we're rejected, we actually feel it as if it were in danger. And it's because, our emotions and our consciousness, or I should just say our technological capabilities may have advanced over the past, however long man has been on this earth, but our biology hasn't changed all that much. And so we are still hardwired very similar to the way that we were even thousands of years ago. And so that feeling is still, oh my gosh, I'm in danger. And so they have capitalized on this and exploited this in order to create these groups. And then what do you have with these groups? They weaponize compassion, because then you have this, mama bear that surges as the Gnostic leader of these.
Gloria Steinem. You're talking about Gloria Steinem and feminism. You're talking about Gloria Steinem,
she's a Gnostic cult,
a CIA construct who constantly changes, like morphs and transmorphs her being. Oh, now she's a bunny who's a reporter doing an expose, and suddenly feminism dawned upon me, and now I am going to push out all of the voices of feminism and just be this bland version of this overarching. Yeah. And she makes Ms. Magazine and becomes the authority. And all of the radical feminists are pushed out of the feminist movement very cleverly, very much like it's a CIA program run by someone who was working for the CIA for 10 years until she set up the magazine, and then she wasn't working for the CIA. So the mama bear, perfect, you're describing her.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So they weaponize the compassion, because what happens when you look at the trait of compassion, typically I talk about something called I call it the compassion traps that they create. And you look at there's the trait of compassion, and that's typically, we identify that with we associate it with women tend to be more compassionate. But what is compassion? If you look at what compassion actually is, I'm not saying men can't be compassionate. Men absolutely can. But typically we associate that with women as being much more compassionate. And here's the reason. It's because what is compassion? We often think of it as being empathy, but it's actually not. It takes empathy one step further, because empathy is identifying with another person's suffering. Even though it's not sympathy, you may not have experienced it yourself, but you feel for that person, for their suffering. But then compassion is the desire to want to alleviate that suffering, the desire to want to, remove that suffering for that person. And that the reason women do tend to be more compassionate is because they're compassionate to their offspring. It's survival. It's to protect their offspring. But what happens when you present a threat to their offspring? They're not compassionate to you. They become vicious, ferocious mama bears. And that's what happens with these groups. So you now have these figures that they're these Gnostic figures, they're the all-knowing, they're the expert, the authority who preside over this group. And now they protect their group. And so everybody outside the group becomes the other. They're the enemy. And so they now protect, and it's much easier to get people to fight against each other in groups than it is if we all retained our individual identity. And you see this through all sorts of, yes, the CIA definitely did this with what's the biggest division we could create is between men and women. So of course the feminist movement, they're going to otherize men. Men are the enemy. So now you have this hero, this leader, this, essentially this Gnostic demiurge.
The patriarchy. That's what it is. They talk. That's what Camille Paglia. You don't pronounce the G. Camille Paglia says, they use fuzzy words like patriarchy that mean nothing, but it's to be able to offset their own shame at not achieving.
I think it does a bunch of things, so a lot of these words are typically they're signals to the initiate. So, it's a way of signaling like, hey, this means you're one of us. They use these words, but it's also a way of creating the drawing the lines. This is our group. You're outside of the group. This is who's inside our group. And then of course it's a way of demonizing, it's the evil patriarchy. But I agree with you. It is a way of, justifying their lack of, I wouldn't even necessarily.
That's Camille Paglia who says,
who said that.
And I kind of there with her.
Okay. Yeah, I don't even think it's so much about achievement. It's more about because I think that's kind of a false premise that's been projected onto people, right? Because what is achievement? Who's deciding the standards for what it is to achieve? And I think a lot of that was even a feminist construct. Because you look at, you look in previous generations, women didn't mark their self-worth by how high up the corporate ladder they ranked. It wasn't determined that way. So, and I think there are even still people today. I'll never forget this actually. When I think I was about 6 years old, and my father asked me what success meant. And, it really struck me, obviously, because I still remember this conversation. And I said to him, I think it's very personal. I don't think there's like a metric for success, because what might be successful for me might be different for you. It depends on your value, what your values are, what you hold dear. So, some woman might determine her measure of success by the family that she's raised, and the type of children that they grew up to become, or how her children grew up, or the farm that she's built, or who knows. We could go on and on with all the hypotheticals, but I think it's just, and some other woman might say, oh, I'm successful because I make 7 figures and I run this corporation. And it's not for me to judge what one person's success versus the other, but I do think that there are a lot of narratives constructed around what it means to be successful. And, when in the case of feminism, I think a lot of it, we were sold a lot of lies. Women were sold this lie that you have to, at least, what I saw in the United States from, growing up was just like, you have to go to college, you have to get this, degree, then you have to get this job, and, you have to make this money.
Kind of looks like the standard model. Kind of looks
right.
like
And in reality, was that going to make somebody happy necessarily? And then you're stripping them of these prime fertile years, right? And I mean that literally. I do think that was by design. And that's not to say that you can't build families later. I'm not that this whole new manosphere, red pill, like whatever wave of red pill we're on now. Some people argue with me. They tell me it's not really the red pill movement. Maybe it's not. But what I'm seeing, I don't subscribe to that. I think it is so toxic. And this idea we all need to be trad wives in order to restore humanity. It's like, okay, well, who instituted the version of trad wife that you are saying we should all model? And why are we demonizing healthy, flourishing relationships and families? Like, that's not productive to the flourishing of humanity, right? Like, they're not the enemy. The people who are in healthy, successful relationships and who are breeding, healthy, successful children, those aren't really our enemy. So why are we attacking? So I see that that's not what I'm saying, but I do think that it's just that we've been sold so many lies, and a lot of it was designed really just to stunt the progress of humanity. I mean, progress in the...
Now, let's take a look at this clip from Grand Theft World with Richard Grove and Tony Myers.
All right, so he was just bringing up 1948, and that's one of the books I've got teed up for you. But before I can get to 1948, he said also no one talks about the ear gun, the Stern Gang in the History of Terror series. So we need to learn a little bit about the ear gun, and then we'll get to 1948. So let's do these books like this. Let's go here. This book is interesting because it has a nice timeline, and then we get to introduction. I'll zoom you in. In October 1944, the U.S. Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, described the ear gun as follows: an underground quasi-military organization with headquarters in Palestine. See, it did exist back then. Look at that. Fanatical Zionists who wish to convert Palestine and Transjordan into an independent Jewish state. They advocate the use of force, violence, terrorism, as we'll see in a minute, against the Arabs and the British to achieve this maximal political goal. And then, if I zoom up a little bit, 1925, Zev Jabotinsky founded the Revisionist Zionism organization, whose non-religious, what is that, Tony? Non-religious right-wing ideology would lead to the formation of the Irgun and ultimately of the Likud party, from which the neocons made the preemption 1998 that we've learned about, and CFR and PNAC and all that good stuff that boils up to 9/11. This all starts with commencing operations in the British Mandate of Palestine, 1931, and then eventually with the bombing of the King David Hotel, killing 91 people. This is back in 1946. And eventually that leads Israel to its being recognized by a state. Here's a 1941 poster distributed by the United States for the United Palestine Appeal. Interesting.
Yeah, conceptually, it had been conceived of by 1925, and to that author's credit, 1931 is when it became a full force in the Palestine region, and it maintained so until 1948. It's important to also note it was an offshoot of the older and largest Jewish paramilitary organization called the Haganah, which I mentioned in depth last week.
And we're going to differentiate
and the Irgun is
in a couple minutes here. I also wanted to show this the enlistment poster. Pretty interesting. Interesting that it's not unlike the story of America with the Union Jack involved so much over here. So that's Irgun. Now let's go to 1948, definitive history of the first Arab-Israeli war by Benny Morris, who we featured last week. And in this book, I had pages marked for you. Where did they go? Where did they go? All right, so I'm going to go to the next book because I can't find my page marker. This one, By Blood and Fire, the July 22nd, 1946, the attack on on Jerusalem's King David Hotel by the Irgun, the Stern Gang. And this has some very interesting Anglo-American foreshadowings, Tony. It's funny how these things work because we were just talking about Churchill, right? Well, Churchill's all up in this. Right here, page 78. So it's talking about the proto-Israeli activists like Ben-Gurion. We're going to learn some interesting stuff about Ben-Gurion. He has a long history before he became the prime minister of Israel. After the announcement by the Colonial Office in August 1945 that the white paper would continue, the activists led the Haganah into an alliance. Okay, this is called the Joint Command with the Stern Gang and the Irgun, which sometimes you can say are interchangeable. Beginning in October 1945, units from all three groups staged separate, coordinated attacks on British government installations. So the British are controlling the mandate. This is how they start to fight to get their own country by blood and fire. Because it was the most powerful member of the alliance, the Haganah had the power to veto operations proposed by the Stern Gang or Irgun. The activists constructed elaborate arguments to convince moderates, and also known as Weizmannites for Chaim Weizmann, that these sabotage operations were defensive and not a departure from Havlaga. They argued that more Jews were needed to protect the Yishuv from the Arab attacks. Therefore, the sabotage of installations, such as radar towers that track down illegal immigrants, was done to protect the Yishuv's defensive capabilities. It constituted a strategy called defense of the defense. The activists also agreed that since soldiers manning the radar towers traveled to them by train and road, blowing up the railway and road bridges was also defensive defense. This logic enabled them to justify attacking any target in Palestine while still claiming to be defending the defense and exercising restraint, Tony. So this is 1946. This has nothing to do with the past week or two. Activists further corrupted the doctrine of Havlaga by announcing that counterattacks were permissible if, quote, the scope of the Jewish reprisal was equal to the magnitude of the British attack, end quote. So if the British blew up a hotel, they could blow up a hotel would be the strategy. During the first half of 1946, so this is right after World War II, Chaim Weizmann's been working for like 40 years on he and Theodor Herzl's dream, right? It's about to maybe come to fruition. They've defeated Hitler. They're trying to get their state. During the first half of 1946, Weizmann and other moderates fought these compromises. They didn't want to use terrorism, Tony. They denounced the Haganah's alliance with the Sternists and Irgun, tried to minimize the number of sabotage operations approved by the Joint Command, and denounced as immoral operations which posed any threat to human life. Yet, although most moderates feared that violence would corrupt Zionism, they also sympathized with the outrage that motivated the activists and terrorists. Let me get on the screen. Terrorists. Weizmann expressed the dilemma facing moderates when he addressed the Anglo-American Committee in March. Quote, I hate political violence, he said. I am uncompromisingly against it. It can only do us harm. It can never do us any good. But I cannot help the understanding the reason why these young men are driven to despair. After the Anglo-American Committee left Palestine, the Joint Command stepped up its attacks. In desperation, Weizmann wrote to Churchill and begged him to persuade the Labour government to reach a decision about Palestine's future that would undercut terrorism. He wrote, you will know that the conditions here are very difficult. He's under very great strain. So he's begging. He's like, hey, stop supporting these guys who are using violence. But for Churchill and his government, violence is the only way out. They are in on this King David bombing, King David Hotel bombing. But let me continue reading further. In May, British Foreign Secretary Bevan, so they're going to make fun of him a couple pages ahead, so his name's Bevan, announced that he would carry out the Anglo-American Committee's recommendation to admit 100,000 Jews only if the United States bore some of the cost in settling and policing them, and only if the Jewish underground armies disarm themselves. So that's what the British Foreign Secretary said. What do you think is going to happen, Tony? They're going to form an argument, a really strong word argument. Weizmann agonized over the letter, decided not to send it. So he's trying to write back and convince them not to use terrorism to achieve their means, right? And then before we get to July 22nd, very famous date, we're going to go to July 30th through July 2nd, June 30th through July 2nd. The government lifted the curfew at 6 on Sunday morning. Within an hour, teenage boys and girls with handkerchiefs tied over their faces raced through the Jewish neighborhood, slapping up posters. Crowds gathered quickly. It was a challenge to read the posters before the police could rip them down. The Irgun posters bore their familiar distinctive emblem, a rifle held high in the fist over a map of Palestine and Transjordan. Underneath was the motto, "Only thus." They described the, quote, Nazi British enslavers as, quote, bloodthirsty, fascist hooligans and exterminators whose hands were, quote, stained with boiling Jewish blood, end quote. The Palestine police were, quote, the British Gestapo and the British SS. The Foreign Secretary Ernest Bevin, Adolf Bevin. So that's about as much of an insult you could leverage back then. One poster said, or one poster read, the rulers of Britain actively helped the Nazis destroy the Jews of Europe. Fact. Another promised that, quote, rivers of blood would flow, for the Irgun had sworn an oath to take revenge on the British Nazi enemy and repay him, the destroyer of our nation, the murderer of our children. And then they had like a poem. The Haganah posters also promised retribution and compared the British to Nazis. Britain has declared a war on the Jewish people. The Jewish people will reply with war. Jewish resistance will continue. Jewish resistance has only begun. Maybe it doesn't rhyme. Maybe it's the language translation, Tony. What do you think? All right, now
that's scholarly work outlining the evidence counter to Ben Shapiro's take that these were, not forced migrations of individuals. This was, rather of their volition based on Arab leadership to have them leave the area because they were in disdain over the fact that Israel has gained a territory for themselves that can be now called the country of Israel.
Daily
and so
Wire
that's
can't afford this, Tony. They can't get this book.
And I'm just to reinforce exactly what you're saying. That's very fair. But you already mentioned the Irgun. Let's just go to, for example, the Nakba. Here, let me put this up on screen. The Nakba, literally.
Is it too early for Nakba jokes?
The disaster.
There's going to be a second Nakba. Is it too soon?
That might be too soon. Catastrophe or cataclysm, that's how it's translated. Also known as the Palestinian catastrophe, was the 1948 permanent displacement of a majority of the Palestinian Arabs. The term is used to describe both the events of 1948 and the ongoing occupation of the Palestinians in the Palestinian territories, the occupied West Bank and the Gaza Strip, as well as their persecution and displacement in the Palestinian territories and in Palestinian refugee camps. Now, what's important to point out about this first section here is the footnotes here. So Webman, 2009, and Saadi. So I looked up some of these quotes. These are all very scholarly works. In Indiana University Press, Adel Manna, the Palestinian Nakba and its continuous repercussions. Let's look at this one. This is Ahmed H. Saadi, Columbia University Press. This is the book entitled Nakba. It goes into Palestine, 1948, and the claims of memory. There's another one, the Palestinian Collective Memory and National Identity, Meir Litvak. So these are all scholarly works from different decades, all outlining the same sort of tragedy. Now, we could say that maybe their references, maybe their evidence they permit inside these scholarly works isn't reality, or maybe they all stumbled upon similar evidence and was able to report on this. Some seem secular, some seem, there's a couple Arab intellectuals referenced here as well. Some were actually, there's one here that was Jewish. In fact, one of the quotes, let's look at this one, just from the Nakba, or one of the footnotes here, has to do with Haaretz, if I can find it correctly. Yeah, this is by Saeb Erekat, excuse me. Quote, Israel must recognize its responsibility for the Nakba and the Palestinian tragedy. It's from Haaretz. It was archived October 10th, 2023. It was rather written, I think, on February 26, 2021. So even from an Israeli newspaper, more left-leaning, I believe, if memory serves, but still. There's a number of works from different individuals that seem to highlight the same sort of reality, that it wasn't just sort of an immigration of their own volition, that they decided to leave the territory just because Israel was awarded, or the Zionists were awarded Israel. It seems to be that there was a conflict, and there had been a conflict instantiated through terrorist activity through the Irgun and the Haganah. Now, just to refresh people's memory about good old David Ben-Gurion, I read this last week. I'm just going to read it one time again very quickly. This comes from Whitney Webb, One Nation Under Blackmail. Such was the historical mission of the Haganah, quote-unquote, defense, an organized Zionist paramilitary network that had been set up by the Jewish Agency, an active branch of the World Zionist Organization. The World Zionist Organization was founded, I believe, in 1895. The Jewish Agency, under the leadership of David Ben-Gurion, oversaw the creation of numerous towns, villages, communal outposts, and defense groups in mandatory Palestine. Now, why would you need to set up military bases and defense groups in mandatory Palestine? Anyways, the Jewish Agency would later atrophy, only to be relaunched by one of Leslie Wexner's mentors, Max Fisher, in 1970. The formation of the Haganah, and I got into Max Fisher last week, the formation of the Haganah in 1920 was a major step forward towards the formation of the Israeli state. So they needed a defense force. They needed Irgun, which is like a terrorist organization of that defense force, loosely associated, to instantiate the Israeli state, or the Zionist state called Israel. Let's continue here. Vital to its functioning was the training and arms provided by the British military. Major General Orr Charles Wingate, who had been dispatched to help administer British control over the territories, worked closely with the Haganah. Wingate even organized joint British Army Zionist paramilitary commando units dedicated to patrolling its... Yes, exactly. In 1945, the Haganah began its effort to stockpile weapons, ammunition, aircraft, non-lethal supplies, and machine tools. 1945.
Machine tools. Well, they bombed the hotel in 1946. So how long did that work out?
Right.
Maybe we should arm and train ISIS and see if it works this time. Maybe.
In the U.S., Ben-Gurion reached out to a close associate, Zionist activist Rudolf Sonborn, who had traveled to Palestine years earlier to survey the construction of Jewish villages on behalf of the World Zionist Organization. Under the leadership of Sonborn, 18 or so Jewish millionaires and billionaires were recruited into bankrolling the supply effort. Thus, Sonborn Institute, as it was known, was born.
It doesn't name them, does it?
The Institute, an active
Benny Morris
collaboration.
does. I found the references that I was looking for.
And this is the final things. And then again, read this last week, but just to reiterate, the Institute, an activist collaboration of Zionist millionaires and billionaires that pursued specific Zionism-related causes, would later serve as a sort of model for the quote-unquote mega group, founded years later by Leslie Wexner and Charles Bronfman in 1991, both very strong pro-Zionist provocateurs and financiers. The Sonborn Institute's chief asset was a Haganah operative named Yehuda Aratzi, and during World War II, he served as a soldier in the Jewish Brigade, a British Army unit that recruited its fighters from the immigrant populations living in mandatory Palestine. By 1945, anyway, so it gets into more of the history with that.
All right, so let's jump ahead to 1946. This is a map of the King
1945,
David,
right? It's when they
Hotel.
stockpiling arms.
Right, and getting training. And now they get to fight for their freedom against the people who trained them last year. I'm just trying to... Ben Shapiro missed this piece. He missed that day in the history of Israel class.
Seems to be contradicting evidence.
This is a big deal. So July 22nd, 1946, there's a whole detailing in this book, Blood by Fire. But I want to take you to this book, 1948, by Benny Morris, because this is the history of the first Arab-Israeli war, and this is also covered in here. It's called Operation Ozzy Osbourne. No, Operation Black Sabbath. That's what it is. Operation Black Sabbath. And by the way, Tony, I did get a Nakba joke written.
Oh, yeah?
Nakba, who's there? One state solution. No, thank you. It's not an offer. And then the door blows open. But maybe that's too soon. All right. This is going from 1948 by Benny Morris, famous Israeli historian. You could, he used to talk about the Nakba. He doesn't do it so much anymore. So you got to check that out. Page 5. Don't have to read too far into the book to get a little history on this situation. Let's go over here. Herzl is talking about Theodor Herzl dashed off a political manifesto, the Jewish state, 1896. I think it was called Der Judenstaat. in German, and spent his remaining years organizing the Zionist movement. He unsuccessfully canvassed Europe's potentates, including Sultan Abu Hamid II of Turkey, to grant the Jews a state. But the Sultan, unwilling to relinquish any part of his steadily diminishing empire, rebuffed Herzl, a master bluffer, who had promised the Ottomans billions, which he did not have and probably could not have raised. And although some of Europe's leaders, most notably Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, were interested in getting rid of their Jews, none were enthusiastic enough to challenge Ottoman rule in Palestine or to vouchsafe any of their own imperial domains for a Jewish purpose. Herzl was equally unsuccessful with Europe's Jewish financial barons. The Rothschilds and their ilk were wary of the wild-eyed prophet or of seeming to engage in an activity that smelled of dual loyalty. Herzl died, possibly of syphilis, in 1904, a broken man at the head of a poor, unsuccessful movement. Then it talks about the Basel 1897, the world's first Zionist Congress, organized by Herzl, had resolved to establish a publicly and legally secured home for the Jewish people in Palestine. The delegates had avoided the words state and sovereignty for the fear of alarming or antagonizing Gentiles, including the Sultan or Jewish magnates. But that was what the Zionists intended. So it goes on to talk about the Zionist enterprise as something that started out with Herzl, continued by Weizmann, and during the time in between, they're like writing back and forth with, Cecil Rhodes about his nascent apartheid state and what a great idea his state is. And they'd like to create something like that. And they keep calling it Palestine the whole time. When they're like, they've got designs on this other place. The other place that they had designs on was called Palestine. So Operation Black Sabbath is the next reference in this book. So let's skip ahead a couple pages and let's learn about this operation where they got the King David Hotel going. Where did that card go? I had two cards. Oh, here it is. Here it is. I got you. Instead of arguing with myself about where the card is, I can just I can read for you. This comes from page 35. Let's see. They're talking. This is Frank Idelette and a bunch of Anglo-American establishment, Cecil Rhodes Roundtable people being discussed. And then it comes to another report called on the Arabs to annihilate all European Jews in Palestine. Interesting that this is going on back then, right? So the AAC report was officially
footnote, right?
Yeah, was officially condemned by the Arab League Council in 1946. The publication of this report led to a resumption of Jewish attacks on British targets, culminating in the Palma's Night of the Bridges. On 29 June, the British responded with Operation Agatha, dubbed in Zionist historiography as Black Sabbath, designed to cripple the Haganah. For 2 weeks, the security forces scoured the Jewish towns and rural settlements for men in arms, and even occupying the Jewish Agency building in Jerusalem, which in fact contained a Haganah headquarters, and arrested 4 JAE members, including Sturtok. But his had obtained advanced warning, and most Haganah commanders escaped the dragnet. The operation was only marginally affected Haganah capabilities. However, the Black Sabbath attack provoked vengefulness, with the IZL ironically taking up the cudgel for its sometime enemy, the Haganah. With faulty coordination with the Haganah, IZL sappers on 22 July, that's when the bombing took place, placed a number of bomb-laden milk containers in the basement of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem. 91 British, Arab, and Jewish officers and officials died. And Anglo-American discussions continued after that. So there is an act of terrorism that took out 3 groups of people, including their own and their ally, as well as the enemy. That led to the British mandate coming to an end, and the state of Israel eventually getting Nelson Rockefeller. That's his name. He got blackmailed. He wasn't the blackmailer in that case. Approval for Latin American votes. So the state was created. So these things are conveniently left out of most of the official super conservative positions that don't question any of this stuff and never look into the origins of Christian Zionism or Zionism, as a matter of fact.
Which the origins, well, maybe later on we'll get to a Greg Reese report that does a good job of going back the whole way to Sabbatai Zevi, something I mentioned last week, and his importance in sort of instantiating in Judaism the idea of the need to go back to a nation state based on his messianism and his self-proclaimed mystic revelations. So I mean, it starts back in the 17th century and pays itself forward with the nation state avalanche that took place in the 19th century. So I think it's important to understand it's sort of rooted in a sort of messianism / manifest destiny ideal. That comes out of weird mystical states, supposedly purported by a messianic figure in Judaism. That's obviously considered to be not legitimate by Judaism as itself. He's been repudiated, but nonetheless, interesting that a lot of those ideas and the continuation and the instantiation of that idea paid itself forward, because after that, groups were set up with the idea that yes, we should, after the diaspora, we should have a right to go back to what is considered our territory based on the Book of Kings, the Exodus, so the scripture.
Did you like
theology,
how Shapiro
and then
went
based
from
on
3,000 years ago
mysticism?
to 1920?
Yeah, I love how
he's like,
and
in 70 AD, Jerusalem was overthrown, and then in 1920, he skips over even the Balfour Declaration. Like, there's a big stretch of history there. Like, if you the argument is militarily tough can displace people. Like, we read that earlier tonight. Isn't that what happened in 70 AD then? Like, if you apply that now, we also want to apply it to the history. And when they don't contradict, we're going to consider that to be truthful, factual stuff. Right now, they're contradicting like a mofo. So
yeah, he's committing a very general fallacy, many fallacies. We want in particular to look out for.
And he's a lawyer. He knows better.
It's neglected aspects. Like, he's purposefully, he's referencing them in this very loose fashion, as though like, well, the counter position is that, there was the Nakba, actually happened or didn't, happen the way the Arabs say, but no, look at what our Constitution says and look what David Ben-Gurion says. So it's like, well, if you're going to quote your Constitution and you're going to quote David Ben-Gurion, both of which are very dubious sources, to say the least, because like one is just words on paper, the other one is an individual that was related to the Haganah in the 1920s and 30s and helped instantiating that organization and the creation of such and organizing it, and probably implicated in a lot of those sort of terroristic activities, or at least had know-how of how that was going to go about. If you're going to use him as a reference, like at least try to debunk the arguments by many other scholars, all the books you just presented, all the references I just read and the footnotes just on like a Wikipedia page as an example. Try to at least negate like the evidence they're bringing to the table, but he doesn't. He sort of glosses over it like, well, that's their position, but I'm just right. Here's my position. So he does this very surreptitious way, this rather beguiling technique of creating straw men through neglected aspect by loosely referencing the neglected aspect without providing context for it. And that's the way, I mean, that
people who create straw men, you should know that straw men are very flammable, and apparently they have no brain. I learned that Wizard of Oz, the second part. But the other part is Ari Emanuel from Entourage. He's the Hollywood super agent, right? Immortalized in a miniseries. Rahm Emanuel, former chief of staff for Obama, mayor of Chicago, famously said, never let a good crisis go to waste. Don't think he originated that. He just popularized it. And Ezekiel Emanuel, Rhodes Scholar, chief doctor in charge of COVID during the pandemic, right? Those three brothers, their dad was an Irgun terrorist who helped to bomb the King David Hotel. Allegedly, according to books that I've read from Israeli scholars on the topic, this is not my opinion. This is me passing on knowledge from the past to you. It's called history teaching. So there's,
as I always say when I teach logic, you should juxtapose both sides and weigh the evidence. And you can see one side is at least neglecting to provide context for the other side of the story in regards to Ben Shapiro, and grossly overlooking what happened in 2006, 2007, especially with the economic embargo. I mean, come on, man.
Oh, for sure.
That's just,
for sure.
you're just parroting propaganda to support the state of Israel unilaterally without any question, and you'll do whatever it takes to hold up your facade, whatever's left of it, of logic and reason and this lawyerly, attitude and disposition, to create all sorts of straw men based on neglected aspects and ad hominem attacks and ad verecundium, like appeals to certain authorities that they themselves were implicated in these terroristic organizations like David Ben-Gurion.
What this did, the King David Hotel bombing and the rewarding of those terrorists with their own nation state, right? Because that's how it gets formed. This is the official history. This is not me blaspheming the official narrative. Well, maybe, but it's the official history, right? It's just inconvenient to the official narrative. Now, that precedent, what did they do? They claimed these terrorist attacks were in defense. They're all defensive terrorist attacks anywhere in Palestine, Tony. It's in their own defense. It normalized terrorism being rewarded. And that trend has continued for the past almost 180 years, let's say. There are these elements and aspects. And the United States, very sadly, the United States government does negotiate with terrorists on a regular basis, and many times arms and funds them. What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions. We can get into the show, we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come on.
Next, let's take a look at this clip from the Indie News Network.
It's how do we miss that? In conclusion, I have some serious questions myself for notes. And everybody who signed this letter. Until he published in the Atlantic, did you have any idea even who Richard Hanania was? Or if there were any other Substacks active that you might not want to be on the platform? I guess is no.
Nope.
Did you ask how much Substack actually profits from this content and whether it would be more costly legally to restrict creators and deal with the censorship lawsuits or allow people the leeway to self-manage the platform. I'm willing to bet they aren't keeping them from being banned for the money. And that 10% Substack gets isn't even enough to hire a content moderator or pay a lawyer. Jonathan Katz and The Atlantic and Marissa Kabas are bullies, and we are all playing their game and filling their agenda to keep the spotlight on one of the few places you can openly question established narratives without suppression. Today, it's Nazis. Tomorrow, it's the people who support the Palestinians. Then, it's those who challenge Big Pharma for the next pandemic that all the bigwigs have been teasing and warning about. This is what they are trying to do. Now, this person says that even privately owned social media platform exists only for profit maximization and market domination. Your question or thought is like wondering why there's so much water on Earth. No, not at all. What we're saying is you have to weigh the risk versus the cost. Risk versus reward. And even if these 200 people leave Substack and take their entire audience with them, how many people does that actually represent monetization-wise? Is that really going to hurt so badly Substack's bottom line that they're going to compromise on the principles of the platform? And by the way, none of them has as big a platform as even Matt Taibbi, let alone Barry Weiss and some of the other people who have signed off on that other letter. And that is what... And that's what Fisto has said to me privately, is that if you look at just the straight dollars of this and the economics, Substack is going to, in the end, side with the larger creators that are generating more revenue for their platform. Now, they have not responded other than having somebody restack L's note. But my guess is that based upon who their large investors are, being Andreessen Horowitz and Y Combinator, and that they are VC funded, which is tied into the DEI and ESG movements, they're going to be forced and pushed by their investors to respond in some way, shape, or form, which is disappointing. I hope they hold the line, because we've talked about Substack and Rumble being under assault from a multitude of apparatus, one of them being Congress. And one of the speculations is that, and if you look at Jonathan Katz's background, he spent time early on covering the Defense Department. Does he have connections with the security state? I'm not going to speculate one way or another. I'm asking questions. I don't know. But I'm going to find out. Oh, yes, you can be sure I'm going to look into this and we're going to find out. What are those connections? FBI, open up! Well, Fisto is convinced that the censorship industrial complex and maybe even the CTI League are involved in sowing discord and implanting this story somehow. And in the escalation and amplification of this story somehow. And of course, we all know that the censorship industrial complex has agents with large platforms on Substack. They have to. They're everywhere. They're in 72 countries, according to the CTI League. We've got to fight this. I mean, I'm standing and punching, and it feels like very lonely out there. There are several that stand with us and several that have large platforms, and they're most concerned that they've seen their freedom of speech at some point either taken away or somebody close to them has been. And they know those dangers of that slippery slope. Even if they don't like what's being published, or they don't like the creator, or don't think personally that they should be monetized. It's not their call. Just like it's not my call. And it's not your call, Jonathan Katz. It's up to Substack Legal, primarily. And remember that because these are VC tech bros, they're going to listen to their lawyers first. It's not even going to be Andreessen Horowitz and the venture capitalists. It's going to be the lawyers that decide how this is responded to and if. And it may take a day or two or three or four for all the executives to roundtable, get together, decide how they want to approach this as a platform and respond after corrections from their legal team. And that may take 3, 4, or 5 days, Marissa and Jonathan. So I'm sorry if they're not necessarily going according to your timeline, if they choose to respond to you at all, which they don't have to. The entitlement that drips off of these people is disgraceful. Disgraceful. You are no better than us, than any other performer here on this platform, than any other creator here on this platform. I don't give a shit how big your audience is. Take it and get the fuck out if you don't like it. And that's what most of us are standing up collectively and saying. So,
yeah,
I don't know how many of you spend any time over on Substack Notes. I actually do like it as a social media entity. I've met a ton of really cool people and found a ton of newsletters and a ton of different writing and people that I would never have found otherwise if it weren't for that new medium that opened up in April. I've been a big embracer and fan of that system. And if I really want to, I can block Jonathan Katz and I can block Marissa Kavas. I'd rather fight with them because I don't want them running around spewing this bile unchallenged. But that's up to me.
Yep.
If it's bothering my mental health so bad that I can't get past it, I can block their ass and move on. And never have to worry about it again. That's the beauty of what this platform has created for everyone. So, this was a one-story, really a one-story story tonight, a one-story show. But it featured a lot of different articles from a lot of people you may not have already heard of. And that's one of the things I love to do here. I love showcasing independence. I love platforming people who write over on Substack. And I like making fun of people that are trying to come after us and censor what we're trying to say, think, and do. And steer that narrative management on behalf of the Atlantic. We see you. Yes, we see you. All right. One more time, I'm going to put up the donate links. If you guys could really hook us up, I really appreciate it so much.
Now, we have a clip from AM Wake Up with Steve and Chris.
Everybody's going nuts over the limited hangout that is the Epstein, the freaking doc release or whatever.
Yeah, I thought it was just supposed to be like a list of names.
Okay, so people seek significance where there is none, and people that are, acting like this is confirmation that Alan Dershowitz is a pedophile when everybody knew dude, ever.
Yeah, it's just a little extra detail in the whole thing.
There's there's additional testimony or additional statements that do add a couple of extra nails into what was a fully welded shut Dersh is a pedo coffin.
Yeah,
it really is. It's like wrapping the coffin after it's been sealed.
Yeah, but that dude's still on TV and shit.
He is about to go be the lawyer on record for the state of Israel in their fucking genocide convention fucking trial. That's who was just announced. Bibi's like, bring me the Dersh. Oh, you're going to charge us with genocide, are you? How dare you, South Africa? Go fuck yourself, Turkey. I've got Alan Dershowitz. And then a day later, it's like, by the way, that guy's a pedophile. But of course, because there is no nation state of Israel without pedophilia. The state of Israel exists to protect pedophiles.
100%. I actually have I have a clip that I found last night of I think a CBS or an ABC news special. Oh, it is CBS. Anyways, yeah, I got a clip of that. How the pedos run to Israel.
Well, let's take a look.
Well, this one is the Alan Dershowitz. He's asking for a list of women so he can rape them.
Okay.
The one point I do want to make is that I understand
all the feminist groups and the radicals who think this is the worst thing in the world, that anybody ever had any contact with Jeffrey Epstein. Where are all those radical feminists when it comes to the Hamas rapes of young Jewish girls, sexual abuse, beheadings? They are quiet. They are silent. The incredible hypocrisy of the Me Too movement. Me Too, except if you're a Jew. And I want to have a list of all the radical feminists who are pushing hard, and I understand that, to get all these names revealed. And I want to know how many of them have ever actually condemned Hamas for the rapes that we now know occurred, the murders that occurred, how many have been silent, and how many, like the National Lawyers Guild, have actually approved of what Hamas did. So let's put this in context. I'm thrilled that all these papers have come out. I urged them. I went to court. I asked for everything to come out because I knew that I had done nothing wrong. And the papers were
What a shook fucking liar.
The judges withheld certain documents. I want to make sure every single document comes out, including the documents that cast doubt on the credibility of some of the accusers and some of the accused. The public has the right to see everything and make their own judgment. We do not country at guilt by accusation or guilt by association. Now, at one point,
yeah, that is the most Zionist thing I have ever heard in my entire fucking life, man. Oh, you want to talk about my rape allegations? I want to hear these people talk about Hamas.
I want the papers and the documents on the victims and their, like, he wants to see their credibility.
Give me a list of the people saying that they want to see this list. I want to know if they've condemned Hamas. You fucking flailing retard. You rapist piece of shit, Alan Dershowitz. You malignant fucking pedophile. What kind of a desperate fucking weirdo goes, you know what? It's all well and good that I'm here to talk about the release of documents that implicate me in a number of rapes of minor children. But I really want to bring the focus around to what's important. And that's the people who want to see me go to jail haven't said a bad thing about Hamas yet. That's what's really important here.
Yeah.
What a fucking scumbag.
I know there's one screenshot of this shit going around about Stephen Hawking. He loves pedophiles, or I mean, midgets, he loves midgets or something, but that one's like fake.
Yes.
And that one's like it's starting to like make the rounds, and more memes are being made that's the one that's gonna they're gonna jump
discredit
on
the whole fucking. They're gonna try to discredit the whole fucking thing based on it, which is what happens every single always.
They're gonna be like, he liked mid-level chalkboards, not
right
up high chalkboards. You fucking liars,
right?
He liked the midgets to be able to reach it. That is a lie.
This is blatant fake news.
Stephen Hawkins wanted these midgets not to be able to reach the chalkboard. That part's a lie. You guys are liars.
Snopes has determined that this is mostly accurate. However, Stephen Hawking's sexual predilections ran along the lines of 12 to 14-year-olds, not midgets. Midgets was reported inaccurately in the initial release of the information.
Yeah.
What's up with this though? I mean, what is that? You just gotta wonder what's going on with your government when everybody who's getting a fucking Medal of Honor is also on the Epstein flight log.
Yes.
Oh, look, it's Ellen. Some weird. Oh, is that Tom Hanks? Why does Tom Hanks look super
Tom
gay?
Hanks, who has his children kidnapped professionally.
Yeah. Wow.
Oprah,
So if you want a Congressional Medal of Honor or Freedom or whatever the heck that is, all you have to do is get on the pedo plane with Barry.
Yeah, dude. Like, and the whole Israel and pedo thing. Like, I came across this last night.
Oh, Ben Rubenstein is on a fucking tear, man. The you guys know Ben. He's been on the show before, I think. His brother is Alex Rubenstein, who's been on the show a number of times. Ben works for Mint Press and Kim Iverson, and he's been on just a fucking tear on Twitter, going, there is no pedophilia. His thing right now is pedophilia. It's the backbone of Israel's national security, and he's right.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Sky is the one who, like, I posted, I don't know, 3 weeks or something about the Talmud. Is it the Talmud?
Yeah.
And what it says about kids under 9 or 3.
Under 9.
Under 9. Yeah. Which is fucking weird because that number always comes up with these fucking religions and
we're
like the age and shit.
We're becoming a trope on this show. We really are. Like, we're now non-Jewish fucking white dudes who are effectively Talmudic fucking researchers.
Well, no, I mean, I try to look up it's fucking hard to even research the goddamn thing. It's hard to even, like, I bet it's a motherfucker to even find a hard copy of the goddamn thing. And then, yeah.
You're just not going to the right libraries, my friend, because you have to go to the actual Jewish bookstore.
But it is, I mean, it's in writing, so I don't know what to do about it for you guys. So I don't know what the, and I mean, like I've said, the whole Holocaust to me feels like it's this thing that was pushed into our brains for 70 years for now, for when Israel gets to make the move and fucking their own genocide and start to fucking try to take God's land back for God's children, so to speak. And it creates a perpetual victim, far greater than slavery.
Yeah, I was watching and I don't have the clipper on this computer yet, but I was watching like a 45-minute podcast with a former Israeli national teacher who was giving a fucking brainwash by brainwash walkthrough of what they're teaching, the Israeli nationals from preschool all the way up through graduation into the beginning of their mandatory military service. And that's basically that they are the most exceptional, God-blessed race in existence, that everyone hates them because of how special they are, that everyone else is trying to kill them, and that it is their job to not only defend themselves in Israel, but expand the greater Israeli project to all corners of the world. And the people who aren't Jews will, of course, be slaves, because what else would they be? That's what they're here for. Instead of let's go read where the red fern grows, and do a little, critical analysis of the structure of it, the tone, the themes. It's you are God's one true chosen people. Everyone hates you, and it's your right to do whatever you want in order to defend yourself and expand your state.
Yeah, that is taught as fact.
So let's go do some mat time, and then we'll have recess. Where we'll play let's go root out the Arabs and exterminate them as our playground game.
It's not like some opinions or something, like a shitty USA Today opinion piece with a clickbait headline. These are fact. These are what they state as facts.
I'm probably going to go through at least 30 minutes of that tomorrow on White Phillip. White Phillip tomorrow is basically going to be Jews and Cat Williams. So everybody knows.
Sweet. I still got like fucking 25 minutes of the Cat Williams left to go. Here's
Were
Alan.
you not? Let's stay on this. Then we'll go to Cat Williams.
Yeah, here's Alan Douche-owitz fucking basically saying in a nutshell what you just said.
We're too strong. We're too rich. We control the media. We have too much this, we have too much that. And we often apologetically deny our strength and our power. Don't do that. Don't do that. We have earned the right to influence public debate. We have earned the right to be heard. We have contributed disproportionately to the success of this country. Never, ever apologize for using our strength and our influence in the interest of peace. And if you need a biblical source for it, just remember the psalmist who said, Hashem oz li'amo yitain. God will give the Jewish people strength, oz. And then, only then, Hashem yivarech et amo b'shalom. Only then will God give the Jewish people peace. Peace will come for the Jewish people and the Jewish nation only through strength. Never apologize for using your strength for peace. Thank you. I look forward to it.
That is the most Orwellian shit. That is Room 101 right there.
Yeah.
Your ignorance is your strength. War is peace. Because if you were to ask him, what is the natural state of things in the Middle East, it would be war. What is the natural state of things amongst the Jewish people? It's war. So what are you saying that peace is? If the all you know is terrorism and conflict, what does peace look like to you? Who among you is capable of processing what it takes to be peaceful? Who among you has the knowledge base to understand what harmony is if all you know is terrorism? There's nobody who's capable of even processing what it takes to be a man of peace. Shut the fuck up, Alan Dershowitz. I'm gonna have this like the 5th time I've said that today. Shut the fuck up, Alan Dershowitz. My God.
Last, but not least, we have a clip from the last New World Next week of 2023 with James Corbett and James Evan Pilato.
Merry Christmas! Happy New Year! Welcome back to New World Next Week? No, New World Next Year, 2024. I'm James Corbett of CorbettReport.com.
And I am James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com. It is our big year-end finale episode. Longtime fans know this is the only episode of the year where we don't know what the other is going to talk about. And our format for the last, decade maybe, we talk about our stories of the past year and we pick our trend prediction for the future, the next year. So, James, I was going back through my notes. I went first last year, so that means you go first this year, my friend.
Yes, I do, and I'm all ready for it. I've got my my Canada mug with my hot coffee, and I've got my unvaccinated and ready to talk politics at Christmas sweater from agorathreads.com. So people can pick up your own version of this if you want to have a nice conversation starter with your family at Christmas. But let's start the conversation. So, James, I know you always at least take a peek at last year's. So, if I remember correctly, my prediction for 2023 was the year of digital ID or something along those lines, right?
Yep, the digital ID cometh.
There you go. So, now, I guess I could retroactively justify that decision with my story for the year 2023, because obviously there's no lack of information about digital ID that came out throughout the past year. For example, the EU has introduced a new digital ID. Here's what it means for you from Politico. EU and Canada launched digital partnership to strengthen strategic cooperation, talking about Canada joining in with the EU ID. Malaysia rolls out national digital ID, clarifies biometric enrollment details. Switzerland presents national digital ID, adoption expected in 2026. The world's largest biometric digital ID system, India's Aadhaar, just suffered its biggest ever data breach, which you'll remember we talked about on New World Next Week recently. Glitches in Japan's unpopular My Number digital ID draws a flood of complaints, etc., etc. So I could obviously justify this and say this story of the year was digital ID, and in some cases, some way, I think you could make that argument. Or I could flip the script, take the coin on the other side. Well, okay, yes, digital ID is coming for sure, but the resistance is coming too. And I could point back, for example, to my article on the global uprising against CBDCs has begun, which I wrote several months ago. Or I could look at something, for example, from my home and native land of Canada from just last month, Digital Loonie. Bank of Canada survey results finds most opposed. Yes, people are standing up to CBDCs, which, as I've talked about before, is the next step of the digital ID. We saw as soon as they started talking about the EU ID and the digital identity wallet, well, we need something to put in that wallet. How about a digital euro? So we know where this is going, and we know all about that. But we know all about that, right? So, in fact, I'm not going to choose that as my story of the year 2023. Instead, I am going to choose the Titanic submersible story. You remember the Titanic submersible. You remember that story because it was the most important story in the world for a couple days. Everyone talking about it, following this story breathlessly, to use that word. Oh my God, what happened? Are they okay? Are they going to rescue? Oh no, they're dead. And okay, move on to the next story. And oh, by the way, as it turns out, little side note, yeah, they knew they were dead from basically day one. Absolutely, they knew, but they just didn't tell anyone because they wanted the whole world's attention on this story. Oh my God, oh, this is the biggest thing. So, yes, the Titanic submersible story is my pick for story of the year because the real underlying point of this story of the year is not the 24/7 news cycle, the 60/24 news cycle. Because 24/7 implies there's a new story every hour. No. We're getting into the age where it's a new story every minute. And that is where we're heading with this 60/24 digital social media news cycle. It's not the 24/7 news cycle anymore. Literally, you could be scrolling infinitely through X or TikTok or whatever the kids are on these days, and you could never stop, and you would have a new, incredible, oh my God, breaking Taylor Swift ketchup and mayonnaise story every single second to keep you occupied forever on the infinite scroll, never, ever actually following a story through to its conclusion. So, along these lines, there are many other stories I could have picked. Do you remember the balloon bombing that baffled believing buffoons that we covered on New World Next Week? I know you do, James, because I heard you talking about it on Morning Monarchy earlier this week as one of the stories of the year. You remember that story? Remember how everyone was, oh my God, losing their minds over this Chinese weather balloon or whatever, and they shot it down or something, and who cares? Whatever. Next story. Do you remember? Oh my God! They just admitted aliens in Congress. They're having these hearings. The disclosure is happening. People, what happened to that? I don't know. Whatever. We moved on. Yeah. Okay. Aliens. They're admitting it in Congress. Whatever. Who cares? Oh, side note, actually, remember the Mexican aliens presented to Mexican Parliament? It turns out, if you follow hard-hitting news outlets like the Daily Star, mystery Mexican aliens are definitely not human and have 30% DNA of unknown species. So, if you're interested in that story, you could keep following that down that rabbit hole. But who has time for that? Move on to the next story. What else have we got? Of course, this isn't just about those balloon bombings and Titanic submersibles and aliens in parliaments. It's about the hard-hitting news stories too. Remember COVID? No one got time for COVID no more. You all got your Ukrainian flags in 2022, right? You're waving those pretty hard. Oh, no. Remember Ukraine? Well, the WAPO doesn't. Washington Post removes war in Ukraine from its masthead. It's no longer there. And people on X are complaining. The people with the little Ukrainian flag in their profiles are complaining. We still care about this, Washington Post, even if you don't. So yeah, it happens there, but it also happens in alt media too. Remember East Palestine? Of course you don't. What? It was the biggest story in the world. Everyone needs to be talking about this story 24/7 all the time. This is the biggest thing that's ever... Oh, wait, Lahaina. Well, no, everyone needs to be talking about Lahaina all the time. Nothing. I can't... James, you are such a shill. You're not covering this 24/7 all the time. Oh, wait, what's the next story? What's the next story? What's the next story? Who cares? Whoever wants to follow up and actually follow anything through to completion. Why do you keep talking about WHO treaty stuff, James? Come on, get to the breaking news of this second. So that's the story of 2023. And unfortunately, I think it's only going to get worse. We're at the 60-24 stage of the news cycle right now. I think we're going to eventually get to the 60-60 because it'll be literally a new story every second. As we become the digital goldfish with the attention spans actually less than goldfish at this point. It's not a happy story, but this is where my head's at right now.
It was ketchup and seemingly ranch.
Oh, sorry. Sorry to all the Swifties out there. Don't attack.
Well, isn't that interesting? I mean, I'm talking about that on the morning show this morning. Taylor Swift and Donald Trump are two of the greatest economic drivers of the 21st century. Man, I hate him so much. I love them so much. You can just project all your hopes and dreams and fears and hatreds all upon them, and they just keep rolling on forward. James, I was writing it out, but you said it. They had been dead already the whole time of the submersible story. But they let us all get emotionally involved in this story. It's almost like a movie that had been written in advance. Man, they're going to be really sad at the end when we kill them. But we already knew what the ending was going to be. Talked about, the Chi-Com spy balloon. Just another story. Kathy Hochul in New York, they are going to take your gas ovens. And they want to. But there's no follow-up, and there's no subtext, and there's no context. James, again, it makes us look like the old guys in this kind of situation. You know what really bugs me? There are the sites and, of course, the Instagram accounts and TikTok accounts that post these stories with no sources, no links, and it's usually a chopped-down version of the greater story. So just recently this week, I was covering a story about these new pod apartments in Pasadena. I saw it on one of these clown world, laugh at the libs kind of channels, and I look for the show notes. There's no show notes. There's no links. There's no context to let you know anything else about this story. And it makes me sad because they don't care anymore. And I guess the kids that are the fans and the consumers of that kind of media don't care either. What was in the show notes? Buy my merch. And I was really tempted. I haven't gone through to click through to be like, I'm sure that's made in China, garbage, pesticide, GMO merch, right? Because they don't really walk their talk. James, that is a pretty great choice for story of 2023. And I guess I've had mine in mind for a couple of months now. I think once I landed on it, it was like, that's it. That's the one. That's going to be my story of the year. I speculated on air a few months back about whether or not you and I were going to pick the same story of 2023, and you were kind of leaning towards mine's pretty left field. It's not going to happen, and indeed it did not happen. Monarchy, story of 2023. So I hadn't remembered my last year trend prediction for 2023 before I had decided on what my story for this year was going to be. So I guess I kind of vindicated myself. My Media Monarchy's trend prediction for 2023, you've got a sustainable screw loose. Blackouts will trigger people's revolt against eco-tyranny. UK, Western Europe in the middle of wind drought. On New World next week, we covered climate lockdowns in the 15-minute city. So now, my story of this year, 2023, it is indeed a people's revolt against eco-tyranny, monkey-wrenching the ULEZ world order. Were you already there, James?
No, I'm on board, though. This is awesome.
Ultra Low Emission Zone, ULEZ, or what they refer to. We can just go to Wikipedia. The Ultra Low Emission Zone, ULEZ, is an area in London, England, where an emissions standards-based charge is applied to non-compliant road vehicles. Plans were announced by London Mayor Boris Johnson back in March of 2015 for the zone to come into operation September 2020. Sadiq Khan, the subsequent mayor, introduced the zone early on 8 April 2019. The zone initially covered central London, the same area as the existing London congestion charge. In October 2021, the zone was extended by Khan to cover the area within the north and south circular roads, and on 29 August 2023, it was extended to cover all of Greater London. The zone has been shown to reduce the number of non-compliant cars on the road. It's been shown to reduce roadside emissions, although its effectiveness has been disputed. In 2022, the zone raised £224 million, which I think shows what it's really all about. So it's essentially these cameras, these high-tech surveillance devices put in the congestion of the city to charge you for your dirty carbon-emitting car. And I think I've read some of this when we've talked about this on New World Next Week. Ted G in my Media Monarchies community has had some great thoughts about this. Poor people can't just go out and buy a new car. If you're living paycheck to paycheck or on the dole, you can't just splash out thousands for a new car because the government told you to. So these ULEZ zones that charge $12.50 a day are essentially a tax on poor people who drive. Anyhow, 1,000 of them have been destroyed. I honestly never expected English people to do anything about tyranny other than protests and social media stuff, however bad it gets, so I'm surprised about this. Sometimes smashing stuff up doesn't work, but I think this actually could. It's not being done at one big event, so the cops can't beat everybody up or arrest everybody. Of the 1,000 or so smashed up or stolen the police have arrested, about 4 people. One of them was actively blabbing about it on social media. The strategy seems to be to make replacing the ULEZ cameras more expensive than the revenue they're getting by stealing from poor people, which could actually work. If this keeps going on, they may get to the point and just be like, oh, this project's in the red, we gotta end it. We can hope. I will include a search on MediaMonarchy.com for ULEZ cameras. Pretty great stuff, really, just in the last few months, James. Police search for anti-ULEZ suspect as hundreds of cameras damaged. I don't know what the number is at this point coming to you December 20th, 2023. Story months back was hundreds, then it became thousands. It might be more than they're willing to blab about on their corporate media. ULEZ, more than 300 cameras damaged or stolen in 4 months. Expanded ULEZ comes into force and will now cover every London borough, so that led to more ULEZ monkey wrenching. Hundreds of ULEZ cameras destroyed by vigilante group following wider London rollout. That was from Zero Hedge. And of course, trust the science, guys. Scientists who peer-reviewed ULEZ report in research group funded by City Hall. Dr. Gary Fuller served as the sole reviewer of the landmark study hailed by London Mayor Sadiq Khan. I freaking love science. Anti-ULEZ protesters damaged, destroyed, or stole 795 spy cams in a clean air zone. That's from The Sun. And they've arrested media people over this. Lawrence Fox arrested over ULEZ conspiracy and then fired by his job at GB News. Lawrence Fox arrested on suspicion of conspiring to commit criminal damage to ULEZ cameras. Suspicion of conspiring to commit. So that's pre-crime. That's almost biblical, like St. Carlin would joke about. If you have impure thoughts, just save yourself the gas money. You've already committed the sin. Lawrence Fox arrested for ULEZ camera vandalism support. And the last one I have from November 1st, nearly 1,000 ULEZ cameras destroyed or damaged in 7 months. Now, I do worry, however, about some of the more recent photos of the ULEZ cameras and the devices hung up, literally strung up on government buildings. ULEZ camera hung up in front of Labour Party headquarters for Barnett. That really seems like it's going to make it easy for the man to say, they're threatening to lynch us. I also worry about any quasi-military level explosives that stink of COINTELPRO. ULEZ camera blast caused by IED as anti-terrorism officers lead investigation. That's from Sky News again. They are using the paranoia trigger words for the people that watch TV and go, I gotta get them terrorists. IED. Hopefully there is no real vigilante group or centralized hierarchy, because if there are, the Fed boys will infest your groups, sow discord and distrust, and start trying to talk you into kidnapping the governor of Michigan. There it is, James. That is my story of 2023, monkey wrenching the ULEZ world order.
Awesome. I love it. That's a great story of the year because it points to so many different aspects of the agenda, but also to what people are doing about it, or at least what they're thinking about it, which is one aspect of what we never, ever, ever, ever get to see in the MSM. They'll never tell you, a lot of people hate this and are really upset about this. Or if they do, it will only be presented in the context of those horrible domestic extremist terrorists that need to go to jail. So yeah, this is a good way to sort of bypass all that. Hey, you can see what's happening around you, and I can attest to that. So September 13th, of this year, I released my Monkey Wrenching the New World Order Solutions Watch episode where I did talk about this. And as part of the feedback from that, I got an email from Pauline who wrote, I can corroborate your recent post on ULEZ. Yes, it's happening in Bromley, South London suburbs. All cameras have been sprayed or skill sawed down, many found in local pond. So it is happening, and it's undeniable, and people notice it and see it and know that it's happening. So that's one way you can directly sort of communicate with others. Hey, there's people who aren't happy about this and aren't going to take it lying down. As you say, of course they're going to try to spin this into domestic terrorism, extremism, whatever. And they will, whatever people do, they're going to spin it as some sort of horrible attack on democracy itself. And you use a potato gun. It's an IVF, an improvised vegetable firearm or whatever, and it'll sound so scary, and oh my god, they're coming to, we have to lock them all up. Of course they're going to do that, but that's exactly what we'd expect. The point really is that people really, really, really are waking up to this agenda, and a lot of the people, I think, who were on the fence before, or sort of like, yeah, we need to do something about this environmental, we are causing all this problem with driving around with cars. Once the rubber meets the road, and it starts to be like, hey, now you, person who's struggling to make ends meet and working your 9 to 5, and now you're going to have to pay an extra tax or buy an entirely new Cybertruck that's going to get stuck out in the middle of nowhere in order to comply with these new restrictions and regulations. And oh, by the way, you can't use a gas stove. And oh, by the way, you can't do this. And oh, by the way, you can't do that. People are starting to see what this agenda really is. The green glove is coming off of the Iron Fist, or the green mask is coming off of the Green Reaper's face. And we're starting to see what this really is. So in a sense, yes, it's positive, at least in that the battle is engaged and people know that we are now in a fight for civilizational existence. People are starting to grasp what this really means. But yeah, unfortunately, that does mean the other side is going to rise up and battle us even harder, right?
I have a feeling it's not a bunch of 9/11 truthers that are out damaging these cameras. That's another one of the positive things. I bet it's newly radicalized people who never listened to any of our crazy conspiracies until it came knocking on their wallet's door. James, there's probably footage of me using a potato gun, so I'm screwed there. Hey, I'm from West Virginia. You fire a potato gun out in the woods. So, your trend prediction, for 2023 was the digital ID cometh. So now I will throw it back to you for your prediction for 2024, James.
Okay. Well, all right. So if we're thinking with 2023 digital ID, and as I've been saying, the digital ID is the first step. It's the linchpin for everything else. And the next domino in that will be the digital currency. So it would be a very safe prediction for me, especially because I think 2024 is feeling like a financial crisis kind of year. They have to stagger and change up their crises. It'll be terrorism, and then it'll be a financial crisis, and then it'll be a pandemic, scamdemic, and then it'll be a financial crisis, and then it'll be a terror event, whatever. So I'm feeling financial crisis in the new year, and at this point in human history, just in the point of world history we're at, a financial crisis, I think, is going to be a monetary crisis. And the monetary crisis, boy, I wish we had a solution for this monetary crisis that's been created. How about this digital currency thing? So I'm strongly feeling that the year of CBDC would be a pretty safe bet for 2024. But let's not go safe. I went pretty safe with my story of the year. It was really a trend of the year, in a sense, with the 60-24 news cycle. So my prediction for 2024, I'm going to predict something very specific, that hopefully will not happen because it's such a specific prediction, but we'll see. So 2024, we're entering a U.S. clown show selection cycle circus. So it's definitely, there's going to be something around that. And exactly why in 2020 I predicted the end of the internet as we've known it for my story of the year for 2020, or trend of the year for 2020, because we're entering the 2020 selection circus. I know 2016, there was all that Russiagate stuff. Something's going to happen internet related. It did. It had to do with the scamdemic. You know, who knows? And you're feeling the results of that to this day, right? With your GooTube channel on all the takedowns they're doing now on 15-year-old videos because you violated these newly created WHO, whatever. Anyway, so yeah. So something about 2024 selection circus. Now, what's popping in the news? What's a kind of trendy thing that they're going to latch onto for the 2024 selection cycle? I know. Trend of the year 2024, the AI deepfake selection. It's going to be something to do with a deepfake scandal that they're going to gin up out of nowhere of some fake video of Trump or Biden or one of Clinton or something that's going to be exposed as, oh my God, it's a deepfake. And there's going to be some sort of, left-right culture war thing about, no, that's a real video. No, that's a deepfake. And who knows what's really going to be happening. And they're going to, of course, adjudicate this in the mainstream media on the assumption that they always have, that they still can adjudicate reality for us. And it will become a thing that will probably lead towards the digital ID prison anyway, because of course they need to do that in order to bring in their stricter controls of the internet, which we know that they're going for. So I would just say, even just in the past week, some stories have come along these lines that point to where things are going. For example, Mail Online, the Daily Fail. How could it not be true? A surge in fake AI-generated photos is eroding public trust in information online, Charity warns. Well, thank you, Charity, for creating that headline for us. Anyway, so that's already in the ether. And also, this story, it begins. Here come the deepfake news AI anchors. Sorry, Activist Post, you need to edit that headline. But anyway, it begins. Here come the deepfake news AI anchors, which I kind of thought already existed. I know that there were the deepfake or the computer-generated anchors that they've had. I'm sure that I saw that story like 5 years ago. But anyway, they're even more deepfake now, and they're all AI-generated content like that Nothing Forever show that you were covering on Morning Monarchy this year. Anyway, so it's definitely in the ether. There's going to be something around, ChatGPT, AI, deepfake, and it's all going to swirl around the selection circus in some big scandal that's going to cause that we need to crack down on the internet and we need to control what you're doing online more and more. So that's my bold prediction, and boy, I hope I'm wrong.
Remember the CNN hologram? The Wolf Blitzer's a hologram in the Situation Room. That's several years back. I imagine them leaning more into that as part of the America's Next Top President 2024 coverage. Man, I appreciate you listening to my morning show so much lately. I makes me happy. And yes, to refer to the YouTube takedowns, my videos from 2010, where I know, and it's been good for me to have folks in my chat who haven't been around that long to be like, dude, you were talking about the World Economic Forum and the Rockefellers and Bill Gates flying syringes and pandemics in 2010. So I should include those links because I got 2 takedowns just in the last couple of days, for literally both from September 2010, where YouTube says, you violated our medical misinformation policy we just made up. I don't get a strike because they actually realize you may not have known this in 2010. I would also take this opportunity to tell folks who are always telling me, why don't you make videos? I did make videos and you never watched them. They're on my YouTube channel from 2008, 9, 10. I did live videos on all my weekly morning shows. They're all sourced and documented. YouTube's taken some of them down. James, archive.org has actually disappeared some of my show posts, and I don't even get a nice email from archive.org about it. I just go there at some point and discover this page not found anymore. So, James, maybe you have got the catalyst I was searching for in my trend for 2024. The monarchy trend for 2024, I should probably throw in some dishonorable mentions and guesses, I suppose. Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia says he would absolutely consider presidential run. Let me tell you what will actually happen while I'm prestidigitating. Joe Manchin's ill-fated run for president will, of course, flame out, and I'm saying he will take over as president of West Virginia University, of WVU. The current president there is hated for cutting a bunch of programs that were hemorrhaging millions and millions of dollars because, of course, people hate honest economics. Then, West Virginia Governor Jim effing follow the guidelines justice, his 2 terms of governor are just about over. So when Manchin goes for the other president move at WVU, I'm saying Jim Justice will become senator of West Virginia. Just some of my predictions. I was just back in West Virginia. There are some folks who know a thing or two about a thing or two. Or how about what Lionel said, Lionel Media? Gavin Newsom will be the next president of the United States. I'm not saying I like the idea or that he'll win fair and square or that the demons won't steal the election legally. I'm just telling you reality. The shadow government and ruling class will never let Donald Trump near the White House ever again. James, have you seen or heard some of the stuff Ramaswamy's been saying, man? Inside jobs, like he's saying all the words that truthers want to hear. A couple of decades too late. There is a reply to that Lionel tweet about President Newsom. They have a different theory. I think it'll be Michael Obama. They're going to run O'Biden. Then within 75 days of the election, something will happen that'll make O'Biden ineligible. And DNC rules say that close to an election, they can basically just place in whoever they want as long as they vote internally within the DNC. And they think that that's going to solve their loss of the black vote. And perhaps maybe some Cold War news gone hot. China says U.S. Navy ship USS Gabrielle Giffords illegally intruded into the South China Sea waters, so she might get shot again. They play with the Twilight language a lot. Signs and symbols rule the world. But those are events, not trends. And since, as you've noted, alt media is preaching gloom and doom, it's all going down, man. So I'll preach some gloom and doom this year as well. My trend prediction for 2024, fake rights turn to riot. Maybe, I don't know, it's weird wishful thinking. I mean, it's only fair, right? I mean, it's only fair, correct? Democrats burnt down cities in 2020, dozens killed, and it's all good. R.I.P. Fentanyl Floyd. I guess I'm predicting a flip of the dichotomy. But what could the catalyst be? That's what I'd written. What could the catalyst be? I think really that's kind of the success of the so-called silent majority. They don't usually have to scream and cry and break stuff because stuff is usually going their way. But there's already lots of table settings happening just within the last 72 hours. Colorado Supreme Court disqualifies Trump from 2024 ballot, setting up Supreme Court challenge. Or the way the Babylon Bee put it, Colorado saves democracy by not allowing people to vote for a preferred candidate. I actually, honestly, I thought it said pretend candidate when I first read that. I'll take the original. She's trying to ban your gas stove while using one herself. Same as Kamala and Dr. Jill. Kathy Hochul, I guess she needs a Civil War history lesson. She was given a speech the other day and said, quote, "We're the ones who fought against slavery." They believe, because they haven't cracked a history book, that Democrats weren't behind slavery, that Democrats didn't throw Japanese Americans in concentration camps, that they didn't outlaw weed, and that they didn't create the welfare state. Civil War was trending the moment that Colorado story broke, but so was Epstein List, as we all hold our breath for the latest Epstein List. But again, what could that catalyst be? I mean, it might have to be the level of, like, trans Democrat soccer player poops on nativity scene. Try that in a large town. I can see the Cokes telling the Pepsis, like burning down your cities, huh? How about we help you out this time? It's going to be an election year. To paraphrase a possibly apocryphal H.L. Mencken quote, no one ever went broke underestimating the intelligence of the American public during an election year. The left has been really good, I think, at crafting traps that the GOP falls into. The Jan 6 Capitol riot, the great example. The left can't meme, but they can create honeypot psyops that get blown out of proportion on their own controlled media. And that's another flaw with my prediction for 2024. The Cokes don't really own much media like Pepsi's do. Republicans equal Coke. Democrats equal Pepsi for folks who maybe just joined us here after 14 years. I guess it feels like the other shoe has yet to drop on the Orange Man Bad timeline. And I know from my upbringing that when the right wants to all get together and decide on something, man, they can do it really lockstep. Garbage Pail Kids, banned. Judas Priest records, evil. Passion of the Christ, most successful independent film of all time. Meanwhile, and like you said, James, I think our predictions dovetail pretty well. A giant economic crash where they limit and throttle your time on their internet and get you on GovCoin, I think will do very well for what I'm trying to describe here. Dollar ills, y'all. Some economists say we have until the end of August 2024 at the outside, could be as soon as February or March. They're predicting the crash of the economy, the crash of the dollar. And as we've discussed on previous New World Next Year episodes, it's the end of the dollar. How they get it maybe remains to be seen. But either way, I guess I'm kind of betting on blue helmets in America by next year's end. But I'm also about to lose my bet that Oasis is going to reunite in 2023. Doesn't look like that one's going to work out, James. I had a bet with a Media Monarchy member, and of course I was going to get tickets to said reunion show, but it's not going to work out.
So what do you owe in return is the question.
Thankfully, we didn't come up with that.
Good, all right. It's a win-win. All right.
Yeah,
anyway, well, I for one hope you are wrong about this prediction in the same way that I'm happy you're wrong about the Oasis because I didn't really like them. But, but I have a feeling that actually this is demographic related because I've never done any research on this, but I would imagine the younger you are, the more you look at the prospect of an impending Civil War 2.0 and go, good, bring it on. Because I think my sense, and what do I know? I'm an old man now. But my sense is young people coming up today know there is nothing to look forward to in this bought and paid for rigged stupid system that has already sold out their future. There is no future if you're young and upcoming these days that doesn't have the bleak specter of debt and all this green restriction nonsense and everything else to basically hamper your ability to reach anything like the levels that your parents or grandparents did. And so I understand there's a lot of pent-up rage amongst especially younger people right now, and that's one aspect of this. And I guess I can make my own pronouncements on that, but it is what it is. You raised the specter of Twilight language, and I did not know there was a USS Gabrielle Giffords. And it's funny, when you said that, I immediately thought Kathy Lee Gifford. I'm like, what? But no, yes, Gabrielle Giffords. Yes, a very, very different story there, as I'm sure long-timers and even mainstream media, let alone independent media, will remember. Yeah, and interesting. And you also raised the specter of Ramaswamy and what he's been saying on stage. And I think he's gunning for Trump's VP. I think that's what he's auditioning for, really. But anyway, yeah, riots from the right. I don't really follow the new media productions very well, but I understand there is a Civil War movie coming out soon, or something along those lines. Civil War, I think, is the name.
I'm sure that would be perfectly timed, just as the Pearl Harbor movie came out right before 9/11.
Right, exactly. The only thing I've seen, I think, is a still, I'm assuming is from the movie, of like a sniper's nest in the torch of the Statue of Liberty, and there's people up there like shooting or something. I don't know.
Oh, so it's okay. So it's not a period piece. It's
no. As in, I don't know. I wish I had. Well, I should have looked it up, but I didn't know we were going to be talking about it. But yeah, people out there will know. You media heads out there will know. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, it's definitely in the zeitgeist. So, 2024 is going to be a year. Let's put it that way.
And again, they're seeding it. They're not seeding, hey, everybody, can't we all just get along? They're seeding Civil War breakdown. Liam and Noel Gallagher have done a ton of music this year. They both put out new records. Liam released his Live at Nebworth thing. Just the trend seemed to be going towards Oasis reuniting in 2023. Maybe, as I so often am, maybe I'm just ahead and they'll reunite in 2024. You remind me of a quote from the very inspirational film called Pump Up the Volume, where Christian Slater says, I don't find it exactly exciting to be living in the middle of an exhausted decade where there's no one to look up to and nothing to look forward to. Bleak. Man, and I don't want to be that way, but I also don't want to be blind, sort of Pollyanna to what's going on. I also don't want to feed into that as well. So, James, hopefully just discussing all of this kind of gets it out into the open to be discussed. That's New World next year, 2024. So there it is in the can, James. Throw in some plugs for myself here at the end. My Best of 2023 6-hour mega music show is coming up this Saturday, December 23rd. It's at 1 p.m. Mountain Time for folks who do listen to my live daily DJ set. It's at the same time, but it's going to be on Saturday. As you might know, longtime DJ and music fan, I've got some of my favorite music of the year, and I guarantee it's going to be stuff you haven't heard all of. For anybody that says, oh, the music sucks now, there's nothing good anymore, I defy that. And I've been working against that for pretty much my entire career. Back in my tiny college radio station, we would get calls and letters from people literally aged 16 to 60 who are like, man, this is really good. You're playing some really good music. You know, I worry about having to go toe-to-toe, face-to-face, and battle intellectually with James Corbett on these episodes. But the thing I know I'm really, really good at and confident about is music. You can check the calendar, MediaMonarchy.com/calendar. Of course, James, once we put this episode in the can, this is usually our end of the year. So I still have my Thursday and Friday and then the big best of show on Saturday. But yeah, basically down to the last 72 hours of broadcasting here in the Media Monarchy Kingdom. NewWorldNextWeek.com, USBs, DVDs, not this hoodie, but down here in New Mexico, where I feel like I'm getting maybe more and more comfortable after a few years now, James. When they ask you what kind of chili sauce you want, they ask red or green. And when you want both, you say Christmas. So I dressed up a little bit of Christmas. I don't think it comes anywhere close to your sweater. Where did you get that again?
AgoraThreads.com. I'll put the link in if people want. It isn't a paid plug of any means. It's just I found it there. I thought it was funny. So if you think so too, you can get your own. Yeah, James, we are not battling or sparring intellectually or musically. So let me step in on your territory and say I have been listening to Nowhere Forever. I just found them recently, and their new album, I just absolutely love it. And so, yes, good new music is still happening. I can attest. All right. Other than that, on my side, go to newworldnextweek.com. There's, if you're watching this as it's being released, there's a few days left on the Christmas discount. 25% off all media products on the store. If you're a Corbett Report member, log into CorbettReport.com, go to my newsletter, find the subscriber code for the subscriber discount for the Christmas code. You get 50% off all Corbett Report media, but only for the next couple days. And then it's back to business as usual. But speaking of which, just on a programming or deprogramming note, I have a couple more things coming out next week after Christmas, and then I'm taking my New Year break. So we'll be back in the new year. I don't think we've decided exactly when we're coming back, but we'll be back in the new year. So I'm looking forward to all the people going, you guys didn't release something on, New Year's Eve. Come on, where are you? Are you dead?
We've not been kidnapped by the Illuminati. We're just taking a little Christmas break. James, if you've been listening to as much as my morning show as it sounds like you have, you can hear I'm about out of steam for this year, about to run out of gas. Gonna wrap it all up on these last couple of days. James, and again, this is where I tell you, man, I love you. I appreciate the work that we've been able to do. It is mind-blowing to me that we're going to be entering into our 15th calendar year of doing New World next week, which remember means we're about 5 years away from you coming to visit
Yeah.
America for the 20th anniversary.
Yeah, is it 5 years? I thought it was only 4, but yeah. Well, actually, maybe 5, yeah.
It will be.
Yeah, right, yeah. Anyway, I love you right back. Thank you for doing what you do. People who, in my audience, have never checked out MediaMonarchy.com, what are you doing? People are always asking me to set up some kind of chat thing or some community kind of thing. No, go to Media Monarchy. Become a Media Monarchy member. He's got all that set up, the Discord and all the rooms and chats and everything, community. That's where you go, MediaMonarchy.com. So anyway.
They threatened. I had a guy today saying, oh gosh, I have to join Discord. I thought you were going to get off of there. They threatened to kick us off of there for, oh, that's right, medical misinformation. I probably talked about this on the show. I maybe even shared the screen grab of the threatening letter. And I don't know if they expected me to just start deleting things randomly, because it's not even, again, like YouTube where it's like, this is the bad thing, remove this and you'll be okay. It just says, you're bad. I, of course, didn't do a thing. I'm not going to go start deleting things, let alone not knowing what they want me to delete in the first place. So we're still on Discord. I don't know if it was a hollow threat. I don't know if we've been put on the back burner because we're not as big a thing. I honestly don't know. It's been a fantastic platform, and yes, I know about Gilded, I know about Mastodon, I know about some of those instances, and maybe that could be an alternative, but honestly, I just want it all at MediaMonarchy.com. And maybe I could host one of those Mastodon instances, but again, I'm really more passionate about being a radio station. So I will continue to be your radio as I have been since September 11th, 2005. James, there it is. New World next year, 2024. Appreciate you, buddy.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's do it again in the new year. And to everyone out there, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, enjoy a little break, and we'll see you in 2024.
Merry Christmas, man. Take care.
Thanks for tuning into another episode of The Independent Review. Join us next Friday morning as I have the honor of being streamed on the AM Wake Up channel. See you all next week.